Hey guys, tonight we are going to do something a little different. We're going to travel back in time about 1,000 years to the Song Dynasty in China. But we're not here for the epic battles or the palace intrigue. We're diving into something much quieter, but in its own way surprisingly more intense. A philosophical argument. A slow brewing centuries-long intellectual beef. We are becoming scholars and our only weapons are an ink brush and a well-formed thought. Your biggest danger isn't a sword, but a devastatingly polite critique that could absolutely wreck your reputation for the next few hundred years. Honestly, you might find a battlefield less stressful. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop me a comment and let me know what city you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is humid and heavy, smelling of damp earth, charcoal smoke, and the sweet scent of osmanthus blossoms drifting from a nearby courtyard. You're in Kaifeng, the capital of the northern Song Dynasty, a city teeming with life. Down the street, you can hear the clamor of the market, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and the sing-song calls of vendors selling everything from silk scrolls to steaming bowls of noodles. It's a prosperous time, a golden age of our technology and commerce. The government is run not by hereditary aristocrats, but by men like you scholars who have spent years, even decades, studying to pass the grueling civil service examinations. You adjust the silk of your robe, the fine fabric, a testament to your family as modest success. In your study, stacks of books and scrolls line the walls. You've dedicated your life to them, to the teachings of the great sages. You can recite long passages from Confucius' Analects and the works of his most famous disciple Meneus. You understand the vital importance of the 5 relationships: ruler and subject, father and son, husband and wife, elder and younger, brother and friend to friend. You know that a well-ordered society is built on propriety, righteousness, and above all, filial piety. These are the bedrock principles that have held the empire together for over a millennium. They are good. They are true. They are, well, a little bit incomplete, aren't they? Lately, as you sit in the quiet of the evening, a nagging feeling has been creeping in. The Confucian classics are brilliant at telling you how to behave, but they're strangely silent on the why. What is the universe actually made of? What is the fundamental nature of a human being beyond our social roles? Where does this sense of morality even come from? Confucius himself famously sidestepped these kinds of questions, preferring to focus on the practical matters of daily life and good governance. When a disciple asked him about death, he replied, "You do not yet know life, how can you know about death?" It's a solid, pragmatic answer, but it's no longer quite enough. There's a void in intellectual space that your tradition doesn't seem to fill. And you know, because you've seen it, that other schools of thought have rushed in to fill that space with some very compelling, very sophisticated answers. Last week you took a walk by the Dragon Pavilion and found yourself listening to a Buddhist monk speaking to a small crowd. He spoke of karma, of the cycle of rebirth, of the illusion of the self and the material world. He painted a picture of a vast, intricate cosmos governed by laws of cause and effect that stretch across lifetimes. His explanation of human consciousness was complex, layered on, deeply psychological. It was fascinating. It made the simple Confucian maxims about being a good son feel a little bit basic. Then there are the Taoists, your other intellectual neighbors. You have a friend, an aspiring painter, who is utterly captivated by the teachings of Lao Tzu and Shugenzi. He doesn't talk about social duties or government service. He talks about the Tao, the ineffable, formless way that flows through all things. He speaks of aligning oneself with the natural rhythms of the cosmos, of the power in wu-wei, or effortless action. He finds more wisdom in the gnarled trunk of an old pine tree or the unpredictable movement of clouds than in all the canonical texts stacked in your study. And a part of you, you rarely admit to, thinks he might be onto something. This is the central anxiety of your time. Your entire career, your social standing, your very identity is built on a Confucian education. Yet in the great marketplace of ideas, your philosophy is starting to look outmatched on the cosmic questions. This has practical consequences too. The exam system you're a part of has become a strange beast. One of the weirder niche problems is that it often prioritizes beautiful, elegant writing over substantive, practical thought. You could be a master of poetic couplets, able to write a heart-nicking verse, about a wilting lotus but have absolutely no idea how to manage a provincial budget or solve a water dispute. There's a growing sense that the system is producing polished literary men, not the sage administrators the empire so desperately needs, especially with the constant threat of the Chen tribes to the north. Historians and philosophers of thought are still in a lively debate about how deep this intellectual crisis really went. Some argue that Confucianism was simply undergoing a natural evolutionary expansion, absorbing new ideas as it always had. Others contend it was a fight for its very soul, a desperate struggle to reclaim its status as the supreme philosophy for life, the universe, and everything. Standing here in your study with the monk's words about calm still echoing in your ears, it feels less like an evolution and more like an emergency. You and your peers feel a profound need to reboot your tradition, to build a new system, a grand, all-encompassing framework that can explain everything from the motion of the stars to the moral stirrings in your own heart. Someone needs to make Confucianism cool again. Someone needs to give it a metaphysics. The question is, who will be the first to try? The question hangs in the air of your study, thick as the scent of old paper and drying ink. Who will be the first to try? You look down at the Confucian classics on your table. They feel like old, respected relatives, wise and full of good advice, but a bit stuck in their ways and able to talk about the deeper, stranger things in life. You can't abandon them, but you can't ignore the intellectual vibrancy happening just outside your door either. So you decide to do what any good scholar would do when faced with a superior rival. You begin a quiet, slightly clandestine program of research. You tell yourself it's about knowing your opponent, understanding the competition in order to better defend your own tradition. But deep down you know you're also just genuinely curious. Your first stop is the Xiangjiu Monastery, a sprawling Buddhist complex in the heart of the city. As you pass through the main gate, the noise of kaifeng seems to melt away, replaced by the low, resonant drone of chanting and the clean, sharp smell of sandalwood incense. It's a different world in here. The monks glide by in their saffron robes, their faces serene, their movements deliberate. Everything is calm, ordered, and points toward a reality beyond this one. You find an elderly abbot willing to speak with you, a man with eyes that seem to hold a universe of calm amusement. You ask him as respectfully as you can about the nature of reality. He doesn't give you a lecture. He just smiles, pours you a cup of tea, and asks you a question. "This cup?" he says, holding it up. "Is it real?" You nod. Of course it's real. You can see it, feel its warmth. And the tea inside. Yes. And the person drinking it. You pause. Well, yes. He then explains in a gentle, circular way that from his perspective the cup, the tea, and even you are all temporary collections of phenomena, projections of a mind that is itself caught in a web of illusion. True reality, he suggests, is emptiness, shunyata. The goal is not to perfect a role in the world, but to see through the illusion of the world altogether. This is deeply unsettling. Your entire worldview is based on the tangible reality of family, society, and the state. His is based on systematically dismantling it. Then he gives you something that really throws you for a loop. It's a public case or gong in what later generations in the West will call a koan. He tells you to meditate on the question, what was your original face before your parents were born? You retreat to a quiet corner of the monastery garden and try to think it through logically. Before your parents. That implies a time before your conception. So what could you be? A spirit, an ancestor, a potential. Every logical path you take leads to a dead end. It feels like a riddle with no answer, designed to break your brain. A young monk seeing your furrowed brow giggles and tells you the point isn't to think about it, but to exhaust thinking itself. You'll leave the monastery feeling both intellectually stimulated and faintly ridiculous. Your next conversations are with your Taoist painter friend. He finds your Buddhist encounter hilarious. They work so hard to find emptiness, he says with a wave of his brush. They build institutions, hierarchies, and 1,000 rules just to tell you that nothing is real. The Taoists have known that for centuries, but we prefer to take a nap in a meadow instead of chanting about it. His approach is different. He isn't trying to negate the world, he's trying to merge with it. He points to the uncarved block of jade on his table. The Tao is like this, he says, full of potential but without a fixed form. To carve it is to limit it. He speaks of a cosmic energy, a vital force that animates everything key. And he talks about a universal principle, the Tao, or the way that guides the flow of qi. It's not a sentient God, just a natural underlying pattern to all existence. You return to your study, your head swimming with these new potent ideas. You have the Buddhist concept of a mind that shapes reality and the goal of enlightenment. You have the Taoist concepts of a universal principle Tao and a vital energetic stuff key that makes up the cosmos. These are powerful tools for explaining the universe. The problem is they are attached to philosophies that you as a good Confucian find deeply problematic. Buddhism, in your view, is too world-denying, to focused on the individual's salvation at the expense of social and familial duties. It's fundamentally antisocial. Stoicism is purer perhaps, but it's too passive to withdraw. It encourages you to become a hermit or a poet, not a magistrate or a minister. Following its path means retreating from society, not working to improve it. And then, as you stare at a blank scroll, a revolutionary thought begins to form. What if you could take their metaphysical architecture and redecorate it with Confucian furniture? What if you could borrow the structure of their cosmic map but change the destination? You could use the idea of a universal principle, but instead of calling it the Tao, you could call it Li. And this Li wouldn't be some amoral natural pattern. It would be an inherently moral principle, the source of Confucian virtues, like benevolence and righteousness. You could take their concept of cosmic energy qi and use it to explain why people are different, why some are wise and others are foolish. And the ultimate goal of life would not be to escape the world into nirvana, or to retreat from it to merge with nature. The goal would be to understand the moral principle of the universe in order to become a better, more effective, more sincere person within society. This would be a self-cultivation that leads not to emptiness but to sagehood. You're essentially planning a philosophical heist. You're going to take the most powerful conceptual tools from your rivals, strip them of their original purpose and repurpose them to make Confucianism an all-encompassing system that can beat them at their own game. Historians centuries from now will debate whether this was a conscious act of appropriation or simply the natural result of centuries of intellectual cross-pollination. Did the pioneers of this new thought deliberately borrowed from Buddhism and Taoism, or were these ideas just so pervasive in the cultural air of the Song dynasty that they were absorbed and re-articulated unconsciously? Sitting here in your lamplit study, it feels a bit like both. You are consciously looking for answers, but the answers themselves feel like they are floating all around you, just waiting for someone to give them the right name. The old guard of Confucian scholars would be horrified. They would call it heresy, a pollution of the pure teachings of the sages. But you sense it's the only way forward. The foundation is laid. Now someone just needs to start building. The air is thick with the excitement of a new idea, the kind of idea that could redefine a tradition. But you personally are not the one destined to lay the first brick. You're a thinker, a ponderer, a part of the intellectual ferment, but the actual architects are a handful of brilliant, daring scholars who are just starting to make names for themselves in the generation before you. These are the early pioneers, the ones who aren't afraid to start sketching out a new cosmic map, even if the first drafts are a bit messy. You begin to hear their names whispered in the capital's tea houses and bookshops. Zhu Duanyi Xiao Yong Zhang Zai. You first encounter the work of Zhu Duanyi, a man known for his simple life and profound love of lotus flowers. He famously wrote that he loves the lotus because it grows from mud but is not stained by it. It's a perfect metaphor for what he's trying to do philosophically, create a pure moral system out of the messy stuff of reality. You get your hands on a short text. He wrote a diagrammatic essay that feels radically different from anything you've ever read. It's called the Taji Tashu, or explanation of the diagram of the Supreme Ultimate. At the top of the diagram is a simple circle representing what he calls the Wu Ji, the ultimate lesson, and also the Taji, the Supreme Ultimate. This feels very Taoist. The Wu Ji is a classic Taoist term for the primordial void, but right away Zhu Duanyi gives it a Confucian spin. This Supreme Ultimate, he writes, moves and generates yang. When it reaches its limit, it becomes still generating yin. It's a familiar concept, the interplay of yin and yang, but he connects it directly to the creation of the universe. The 5 phases, water, fire, wood, metal, earth, emerge from this interplay, and from them the 10,000 things of the world, including humanity. But here's the crucial part. He says that when humans are created, they receive the most refined form of this cosmic energy, and it's this that gives them their intelligence and, most importantly, their moral nature. He has in one fell swoop created a direct and broken line from the very origin of the cosmos to the feeling of right and wrong in your own heart. It's a breathtakingly ambitious move. Next, you dive into the strange and wonderful world of Xiaoyang. This man is a different beast entirely. Hes less of a moral philosopher and more of a cosmic numerologist. Hes obsessed with pattern cycles and the mathematical structure of the universe. Hes heavily influenced by the Yi Jing, the ancient book of changes with its 64 hexagrams that are said to encapsulate all possible situations in life. Xiaoyang takes this to a whole new level. He develops an elaborate system where everything from the rise and fall of dynasties to the life cycle of them can be explained and even predicted through the endless cycling of these hexagrams. He creates massive charts that map cosmic history over tens of thousands of years. Reading Xiaoyang is a dizzying experience. It's less like philosophy and more like trying to decipher the source code of reality. He argues that the universe is knowable because the human mind is a microcosm of the cosmic mind. The same principles that govern the stars govern your thoughts. His work gives you a powerful, if slightly eccentric sense of order. It's a system where nothing is random. Even chaos is just a part of a larger, predictable pattern. One of his more peculiar but charming ideas is that he could communicate with the things of the world not by treating them as things, but by treating them as he would treat other people. It was a kind of empathetic observation. It's an empowering thought suggesting that if you are clever enough, you can see ahead and understand your place in the grand scheme of things. But the pioneer who resonates with you most deeply, the one whose words feel like they are written with fire, is Zhang Zai. He was a man of stern character and immense intellectual courage. He tackles the Buddhist idea of emptiness head-on. Where the Buddhists see the world as ultimately illusory, Zhang Zai makes a bold, defiant claim. The universe is made of one single, ever-present, ever-transforming substance. He calls it Qi. There is no such thing as non-existence or emptiness. When a thing seems to disappear, its Qi has merely dispersed or changed form. When something comes into being, its Qi has simply condensed. This directly refutes the Buddhist concept of void. The world, he argues, is intensely fundamentally real. From this single premise, he derives a powerful new ethical vision. You read his famous Western inscription, a short text that he literally inscribed on the west wall of his study, and you feel a profound shift in your understanding of your place in the world. He writes, "Heaven is my father and earth is my mother, and even such a small creature as I finds an intimate place in their midst." He goes on to say that all people are therefore your brothers and sisters and all things are your companions. It's a radical expansion of the traditional Confucian family ethic. Your duty is no longer just to your own kin. It's to the entire cosmos. This isn't just a philosophy, it's a creed. It provides a metaphysical grounding for universal compassion that feels just as profound as the Buddhist version, but it keeps you firmly planted in this world, engaged with this society. These three men, Chu Xiao and Zhang, are not a formal school. They all knew each other to varying degrees, but they were working on different pieces of the same puzzle. Xu Du and why I provided the cosmic genesis story. Xiaoyang mapped its intricate cyclical patterns, and Zhang Zai gave it its substance and its soul. Together they laid the groundwork. They sketched the first drafts of what would become a massive intellectual cathedral, but their ideas were still scattered, sometimes contradictory, and not yet woven into a single coherent system. They had successfully rebooted the conversation. They had brought metaphysics back into Confucianism. Now the stage was set for the next generation to come in to argue over the details and to try and build a truly unified structure. And that's when the real arguments and the real fun would begin. The question of whether these pioneers were true originals or simply brilliant synthesizers of existing Taoist and Buddhist ideas is a classic one. Scholars still debate just how much of their new Confucianism was truly new versus how much was a clever rebranding of old concepts. But from your vantage point, it feels like the dawn of a new era. The foundational sketches from the pioneers are exhilarating, like seeing the first architectural drawings for a magnificent new temple. But drawings are one thing, building is another. The next generation of scholars rolls up their sleeves and immediately starts arguing about the load-bearing walls of this new intellectual structure. The center of this new activity isn't in the bustling capital anymore, but in the province of Henan, where the brothers Cheng Hao and Cheng Yi have established themselves as the most brilliant thinkers of their day. You find yourself drawn into their circle, eager to learn from them directly. Attending a lecture by the Cheng brothers is a study in contrasts. The elder brother Cheng Hao is warm, approachable, and has a gentle, almost intuitive way of speaking. His students describe his presence as being like sitting in a spring breeze. He talks about morality in broad, holistic strokes. He emphasizes the feeling of oneness with all things, a concept he clearly inherits from Zhang Zai. For Cheng Hao, the ultimate virtue of benevolence isn't just a rule to be followed. It's the visceral, undeniable experience of being part of a single cosmic body. He tells you a famous analogy. A doctor who describes the numbness of a paralyzed limb as unfeeling is describing a lack of connection. In the same way, a person who lacks benevolence is simply numb to their innate connection with the rest of humanity and the universe. The goal is to overcome this spiritual paralysis and feel that unity. His teaching is inspiring, uplifting, and feels wonderfully simple. Then you attend a session with his younger brother Cheng Yi. The spring breeze is gone, replaced by a sharp analytical chill. Cheng Yi is rigorous, demanding, unrelentlessly logical. Where his brother is gentle, he is stern. He doesn't want you to just feel the truth. He wants you to understand it piece by piece. He is the one who takes the vague concepts floating around and forges them into precise philosophical tools. He is obsessed with a single powerful distinction: the difference between what he calls Li and Qi. Use it on a woven mat, as Cheng Yi explains. Li, he says, is the principle, the blueprint, the underlying pattern of the universe. It is singular, eternal, and perfect. There is a leaf for a tree which dictates that it should grow upwards and have leaves. There is a leaf for a government which dictates that it should be ordered and just. And there is a leaf for you, a human being, which is your innately good and perfect moral nature. This Li is the same in every single person, from the wisest sage to the most wicked tyrant. It's like a perfect set of instructions. Tai Chi is essentially taking Zhu Du Ny as cosmic genesis and Zhang Ziyi is universal connection and giving it a sharp, definable name and function. But then he says there is Qi. Qi is the vital force, the cosmic energy, the actual stuff that makes up everything you see and touch. It's the physical material that fills out the blueprint of Li. Unlike Li, which is perfect and universal, Qi is messy. It can be clear or turbid, pure or impure. And this, Cheng Yi explains, is the great cosmic tragedy and the source of all problems. Everyone has the same perfect Li within them, the same potential for sagehood. But we are all endowed with a different quality of Qi. Someone born with clear, pure Qi will find it easy to be good. Their moral nature will shine through effortlessly. But someone born with murky, turbid Qi will have their perfectly obscured. Their desires, emotions, and physical urges will run wild, clouding their innate goodness like mud clouds clear water. This is a breakthrough moment for you. This simple-sounding distinction explains everything. It explains why the world is not perfect, even though its underlying principle is. It explains why people are not all saints, even though they all possess a saintly nature. And it provides a clear path for self-cultivation. The goal of your life, according to Cheng Yi, is to purify your Qi so that your Li can manifest itself. How do you do that? Through relentless study, discipline, and self-examination. You must investigate things, Ji Wu, examining the principle in everything from a blade of grass to a passage in the classics, until you finally achieve a moment of sudden enlightenment and see the single principle that unites them all. This is a far more demanding, unmethodical path than the one offered by his brother Cheng Hao. You see the tension between them clearly. Cheng Hao emphasizes a kind of calm composure and intuitive recognition of the unity of all things. His method is more about cultivating a certain state of mind. Cheng Yi demands rigorous, piecemeal intellectual labor. He wants you to analyze, dissect, and understand. One of their most telling disagreements, which you hear them debate, is over the nature of knowledge and action. Cheng Hao leans toward the idea that once you truly understand the good, you will naturally do it. The feeling of unity is so compelling that it moves you to act benevolently. Cheng Yi is more skeptical. He believes you need constant conscious effort. He introduces a famous and somewhat controversial concept: Ji Wu Zhi's, HI, or reaching knowledge through the investigation of things. The exact meaning of this phrase will be debated for the next 900 years. Does investigation of things mean empirical scientific study of the natural world? Does it mean textual analysis of the classics? Does it mean introspection on moral events in your life? Cheng Yi himself seems to mean a combination of all three, but his lack of perfect clarity leaves a door wide open for future arguments. The two brothers, despite their differences, are laying the twin foundations for this new philosophy, which will soon be called Neo-Confucianism. Cheng Hao's more intuitive, mind-focused approach will become one major stream of thought. Cheng Yi's more rational, principle-focused approach will become the other. They are not enemies. They respect each other immensely, but they are planting the seeds of the first great schism within the movement. You realize that this new philosophy isn't going to be a single monolithic temple after all. It's going to be a grand cathedral with two competing wings, each designed by a different brother, each with a different path to the heavens. The intellectual energy crackling around the Cheng brothers is potent, but as their students and followers begin to spread their ideas, that energy starts to polarize. The subtle differences in emphasis between Cheng Hao's intuitive holistic approach and Cheng Yi's rigorous analytical method are magnified by their disciples. What was a respectful in-house debate between two brilliant brothers slowly escalates into the first major philosophical beef of the movement. You're no longer just a student of the Cheng's, you now have to pick a side. Are you Team Hao or Team Yi? The fault line runs right through the heart of the new philosophy, splitting it into two camps that historians will later dub the school of mind and the school of principle. You find yourself at gatherings where the arguments get surprisingly heated, though always couched in polite scholarly language. A follower of Cheng Hao might start by saying, to seek for principle outside of the mind is to separate the mind and principle into two. It's a subtle jab implying that Cheng Yi's method is too external, to focused on books and objects, and misses the central point, that the truth is already within you in your innate feeling of benevolence. They speak of Ding Xing, or calming one's nature, a practice that involves sitting quietly and cultivating a state of mental stillness, allowing your inherent goodness to surface naturally like oil rising to the top of water. It's a meditative, inward-looking path. It feels gentle, organic, and deeply personal. But then a staunch defender of Cheng Yi's teachings will stand up, adjust his robes, and offer a sharp rebuttal. The principle may be within the mind, he might concede, but without the diligent investigation of things, how can you be sure that what you are feeling is the true heavenly principle and not just your own selfish, murky desire? This is the core of their critique. They are deeply suspicious of relying on feelings and intuition alone. Human emotions are fickle, they argue. What feels right might just be a product of your impure ki. To them, the school of mind's approach looks dangerously close to the quietistic, do-nothing meditation of the Buddhists and Taoists. It's intellectually lazy and morally risky. They champion Cheng Yi's demanding program of Ji with the investigation of things. For them, true understanding isn't a warm, fuzzy feeling of oneness. It's a hard-won intellectual achievement. You have to earn it. You must read the classics, study history, observe the natural world, and scrutinize every moral situation you encounter. Each act of investigation is like polishing a small spot on a dirty mirror. You do it over and over again, book by book, event by event, until one day, in a flash of insight, the entire mirror becomes clean and you see the universal principle reflected perfectly. It's a path of tireless effort and scholarly rigor. It feels more objective, more reliable, and less susceptible to self-deception. This isn't just an abstract debate. It has real-world implications for how you live your life as a scholar and a potential official. If you follow Cheng Hao's path, your daily practice might involve long periods of quiet sitting, trying to silence your thoughts and connect with your fundamental nature. You would focus on cultivating a sense of calm, composure, and universal empathy. Your goal is to become the kind of person who responds to situations with spontaneous and forced goodness. If you align with Cheng Yi, your days are much busier. Your study is a laboratory. You are constantly reading, cross-referencing, and analyzing. You keep a detailed journal of your moral successes and failures, scrutinizing your own motivations. When you look at a bamboo stalk in the garden, you're not just admiring its beauty. You're contemplating the li of bamboo-ness and how it relates to the li of your own nature. It is an active, almost strenuous intellectual life. One of the odd little side arguments that pops up is about reverence Jing. Both sides agree it's important, but they mean slightly different things by it. For the Cheng Hao camp, reverence is about a state of inner composure a quiet respect for the goodness within. For the Cheng Yi, reverence is an active, focused state of mind you must maintain while you are investigating things. It's the seriousness and attention you bring to your studies like a scientist in a lab. The political situation of the time adds another layer of drama to this philosophical split. The Song court is plagued by factionalism. Reformist and conservative parties are locked in a bitter struggle for power, and scholars are often forced to align with one side or the other. This philosophical beef gets tangled up in the political drama. Your choice of philosophical master could have real consequences for your career prospects. Some officials favor the more intuitive types, while others prefer the rigorous scholars. This split right at the start of the movement is both a weakness and a strength. It's a weakness because it prevents the Neo-Confucianism from presenting a single unified front against its Buddhist and Taoist rivals. The internal squabbling consumes a lot of energy. But it's also a strength because it creates a dynamic tension that keeps the philosophy alive and evolving. It's not a static dogma set in stone, it's a living argument. The debate forces each side to refine its positions, to find better analogies, and to defend its first principles. Historians still puzzle over the exact nature of this early split. Was it really two distinct schools, or is that a neat label that scholars later imposed on a much messier reality? Many thinkers of the time probably took ideas from both brothers, but the narrative of a split is powerful, and it sets the stage for the next major act in this intellectual drama. The movement is vibrant, full of potential, but it's also a bit of a mess. It's crying out for a synthesizer, a grand organizer who can take all these brilliant competing ideas and forge them into a single, coherent, and utterly dominant system. The world is waiting for someone with the intellectual ambition of Cheng Yi and the organizational genius of a master librarian, and he is about to arrive. Just as the philosophical debate between the two schools seems destined to simmer in a state of unresolved tension, a new figure walks onto the intellectual stage. Or rather, he doesn't walk. He methodically, deliberately, and with immense confidence begins to build. His name is Zhu Shi, and he is, to put it mildly, a game changer. You first hear of him as a young prodigy from Fujian province, a man who passed the highest level civis exam at the astonishingly young age of 18. But unlike many of his peers, he doesn't rush into a high-profile government career. Instead, he spends years in relative obscurity studying, thinking, and most importantly, organizing. Zhu Shi is the ultimate synthesizer. He looks at the intellectual landscape left by the pioneers and the Cheng brothers and sees not a confusing mess, but a brilliant collection of parts waiting to be assembled. He has the systematic mind of an architect, the meticulousness of a librarian, and the ambition of an emperor. He sees the power in Cheng Yi's rationalism, the moral warmth in Cheng Hao's teachings, the cosmic scope of Zhu Duanyi, and the ethical passion of Zheng Zai. He decides his life's work will be to take the best ideas from all of them and construct a single comprehensive and unshakable philosophical system. A grand synthesis that will become the definitive form of Confucianism for the next 700 years. You get your hands on some of his early letters and commentaries, and you are immediately struck by his clarity and intellectual rigor. He doesn't just state ideas, he defines them, categorizes them, and links them together in a vast logical chain. He takes the foundational concepts of leap principle and key vital force from the Cheng brothers and elevates them to the absolute center of his system. He sides firmly with the more analytical Cheng Yi, making the school of principle the dominant thread of his new philosophy. But he is clever. He doesn't completely dismiss the school of mind. Instead, he absorbs its most useful ideas, reinterpreting them to fit within his own structure. For example, he accepts Cheng Hao's idea of benevolence as a feeling of unity with all things, but he frames it as the natural state of your mind when your Li is fully realized, not just a feeling you can achieve through quiet sitting alone. His life is a testament to his own philosophy of diligent, tireless effort. He is an unbelievably prolific writer. He pens hundreds of volumes of work, commentaries on the classics, philosophical treatises, letters to other scholars, family rituals, and even advice on granary management. He seems to have an opinion on everything, and he backs it up with exhaustive research and argumentation. You hear stories of his daily routine, waking before dawn to doing his study, paying respects to his ancestors, and then spending the entire day reading, writing, and teaching, often by candlelight late into the night. He is a man possessed by a mission. One of his most significant projects is a massive compilation of the works of the Northern Song masters Zhu Duan, Why Ai Zhangzai and the Cheng brothers. He gathers their scattered writings, edits them, undads his own extensive commentaries, effectively curating the tradition and presenting himself as its rightful heir. It's a brilliant power move. By creating this anthology, he not only preserves their work but also frames it through his own interpretive lens. Future generations will often read the pioneers not on their own terms, but through the guiding hand of Zhu Xi. But He is not just a dry academic. He is also a passionate educator. He spends much of his life teaching at his own private academy, the White Deer Grotto Academy, which he single-handedly revives and turns into the most important center of learning in his time. You imagine what it would be like to be one of his students. It would be intimidating. He would demand absolute precision in your thinking. If you used a term loosely, he would stop you and ask you to define it. If you made a historical claim, he would ask for your source. Yet his students report that he was also a patient and caring teacher, deeply invested in their moral and intellectual development. His political career, in contrast to his scholarly one, is a bit of a disaster. He gets several government posts, but is too rigid, too honest, and too willing to call out corruption. He.S. impeached from his post as a prefect after accusing a number of influential officials of misconduct. He spends most of his life out of political favor, which ironically gives him the time and space to complete his monumental philosophical work. His critics, and there are many, attack him viciously. At one point he is accused of a list of ridiculous crimes, including disrespect for the emperor and practicing false learning. His teachings are actually banned for a time. This period of official disgrace only adds to his legend. He becomes a martyr for his ideas, a scholar of integrity, who refused to compromise his principles for political gain. And this, in a strange way, makes his philosophy even more appealing. It's not just a set of abstract ideas, it's a path walked by a man who lived and suffered for it. The historical debate around Zhu Xi is immense. Is he the greatest Confucian thinker since Manius, the man who saved the tradition and gave it a new life? Or is he a rigid systematizer who took a vibrant living debate and locked it into a dogmatic orthodoxy that stifled creativity for centuries? The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in between. But from your perspective in the 12th century, watching him work, it's impossible not to be in awe of the sheer scale of his project. He is building an intellectual edifice so vast and so detailed that it seems to have an answer for everything. And he starts with the two most fundamental building blocks of all: the invisible blueprint of the universe and the messy stuff of life itself. You are now a student at UXIS Academy, and your first lesson is on the most fundamental concept in his entire system, Li. Principle. You've heard the term before from the Cheng brothers, but Zhu Xi polishes it, refines it, and places it on a cosmic throne. He gathers you and a few other students in a simple hall. There's no grand ceremony, just the man himself, a pot of tea, and the universe to explain. He begins not with a dense philosophical text, but with a simple question. He points to the wooden table in front of him. Why is this a table? He asks. You hesitate. Because it has a flat top and 4 legs. Because you can put things on it. He nods. Precisely. It has a certain form, a certain function. That, he says, tapping the table, is its Li. The principle of tableness. Before any carpenter ever cut a piece of wood, the principle of the table already existed. This is a mind-bending idea. The Li is not something people invent, it's something they discover. It's a pre-existing, eternal and perfect blueprint. He then expands the concept with breathtaking speed. There is a Li for this table, he says. And there is a Li for the bamboo growing outside, a Li for the horse in the stable, a Li for the ship sailing on the river. Every single object, every single phenomenon in the universe has its own principle that defines what it is and how it should be. But then he makes the crucial move. And all of these individual principles, he continues, his voice slow and intense, are ultimately just different aspects of one single universal principle, the supreme ultimate, the Taoji. He explains that this supreme ultimate is the sum total of all principles in the universe. It's the master blueprint for all of reality. It is pure, perfect, and unchanging. It contains the principle of being a father, the principle of being a ruler, the principle of a mountain, the principle of a stream. Everything fits together in a perfect, harmonious cosmic order. Now he turns his attention from the table to you. And you, he says, you also have Li within you. It is your nature. It is the perfect blueprint of what it means to be a human being. This, he explains, is the source of your morality. The 5 constants, benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trustworthiness, are not just social conventions. They are woven into the very fabric of your being. They are your Li. This is why when you see a child about to fall into a well, you feel an immediate and thinking urge to save them. That's not a learned response. That's your innate perfect heavenly principle spontaneously manifesting itself. This is a profoundly empowering and optimistic view of human nature. At your core, you are perfectly good. You have the blueprint for sagehood already installed within you. You are in essence hardwired for goodness. It solves the great problem that the early Confucianists never fully addressed. Where does morality come from? Zhu Shi's answer is definitive. It comes from the very structure of the cosmos. To be moral is to be in alignment with the universe itself. But as you sit there feeling pretty good about your innately perfect nature, a question nags at you. If everyone's Li is perfect, why is the world such a mess? Why are there corrupt officials, selfish merchants, and cruel tyrants? Why do you yourself sometimes feel lazy or angry or greedy, even when you know you shouldn't? If you have the perfect blueprint, why is the building so often flawed? This is the great paradox, and Zhu Shi has already answered. But it requires understanding the second half of his cosmic equation. He has given you the perfect, pristine, invisible world of Li. Now he is about to introduce you to its messy, tangible, and often troublesome partner, the vital force, the stuff of life, Qi. One of the interesting and for some problematic aspects of this idea of Li is its relationship to a supreme being. Is the Toji a kind of god? Zhu Shi is very careful here. He says that Li has a creative and governing quality, almost like a divine will, but it is not a conscious personal deity. It doesn't answer prayers or intervene in human affairs. It's more like a fundamental law of physics and morality rolled into one. There's a famous, perhaps apocryphal story where one of his students asked him, "Does heaven and earth have a mind?" Zhu Shi supposedly answered, "Heaven and earth have no mind of their own, but they take the mind of humans as their mind." Historians and philosophers have debated for centuries whether his system leaves room for a personal god or whether it's fundamentally a naturalistic philosophy. It's a tension that Zhu Shi himself never fully resolves, leaving his system feeling both deeply spiritual and surprisingly modern. For now, you are left to contemplate this invisible, perfect pattern that underpins all of existence, a silent, eternal law that dictates how a star should move, how a tree should grow, and how you should live. Having laid out the pristine, perfect world of Li, she now takes you on a tour of its counterpart, the world of Qi. If Li is the perfect architectural blueprint, Qi is the building material. It's the concrete, the wood, the wiring, and the plumbing. And as any builder will tell you, the quality of the material matters a lot. Look around you. Zhu Shi says, gesturing to the room, the courtyard, the world beyond. Everything you can see, touch, hear, or smell is made of Qi. The table isn't just the principle of tableness. It's a physical object made of the condensed Qi that forms wood. You are not just the principle of humanness. You are a living, breathing being composed of the dynamic, flowing Qi that constitutes your body, your emotions, and your thoughts. Li gives things their form, but Qi gives them their existence. One cannot exist without the other. He uses a powerful analogy. Li is like a rider and Qi is like the horse. The rider has the destination and the plan, but it needs the horse to actually get anywhere. This is where the messiness of life comes in. Unlike Li, which is singular and perfect, Qi is endlessly variable. It can be pure and clear like the crisp air on a mountaintop, or it can be turbid and murky like the muddy water at the bottom of a pond. When the universe began, Zhu Shi explains, drawing on the cosmology of the pioneers, Qi began to differentiate. Some Qi became the light ethereal substance of the heavens, while other Qi became the heavy dense substance of the earth. And this variation applies to people too. This is Zhu Shi's powerful and controversial explanation for why the world isn't perfect. At the moment of your conception, you are endowed with your portion of Qi, and the quality of that Qi is essentially a cosmic lottery. Some people are fortunate enough to receive clear, balanced Qi. For them, their perfect Li shines through effortlessly. They are naturally intelligent, calm, and virtuous. These are the sages and worthies. But most people, he explains with a sigh, receive Qi that is somewhat turbid or imbalanced. Your Li, or perfect moral nature, is still there, completely intact. But it's obscured. It's like a pearl lying at the bottom of a muddy pond. The pearl is still perfect, but you can't see it clearly. This murky Qi is the source of all your problems. It's the origin of selfish desires, irrational emotions, and physical weaknesses. When you feel a surge of anger, that's your ki acting up and clouding the benevolent principle within you. When you feel lazy and choose to nap instead of study, that's your turbid ki obstructing the principle of diligence. This is a stark and somewhat deterministic picture. It suggests that your moral and intellectual potential is largely determined by the physical stuff you're made of. This is one of the most debated aspects of Zhu Xi's philosophy. Does it create a kind of spiritual aristocracy where some people are just born better than others? Zhu Xi's critics certainly thought so. They argued it could lead to a kind of fatalism where someone could simply say, "I can't help being a bad person, I just have bad ki." But Zhu Xi is no fatalist. This is the crucial point of his entire program of self-cultivation. Yes, you may be born with a disadvantage, a particularly stubborn horse to use his analogy, but you, the rider, have the ability to train the horse. The purpose of education and self-discipline is precisely to purify and clarify your ki. It's a long, difficult process of transformation. You have to physically and mentally reshape the very substance you're made of. This idea leads to some interesting and slightly quirky practical advice. For example, Zhu Xi and his followers believe that things like diet, posture, and even the physical environment could affect your ki. A tidy, well-ordered study helps to order the ki in your mind. A balanced diet helps to balance the ki in your body. One slightly odd side effect of this philosophy was a focus on what we might call physiognomy, the idea that you could tell something about a person's inner character by their physical appearance. A person with a clear complexion and bright eyes was thought to have clearer ki than someone with a dull, sallow look. This is a classic example of a cold knowledge tidbit that grew out of the main theory, the belief that physical attributes reflect one's psychophasic substance or ki. So the human condition, as Zhu Xi paints it, is a dynamic struggle. It's the eternal perfect principle of light wrapped inside the transient imperfect energy of ki. Your life's work is to bridge that gap. You are both a perfect blueprint and a flawed building. You are both a divine sage and a struggling animal. The tension is immense, but it also gives you a clear and urgent mission. Your task is not just to behave well. It's to engage in a profound act of personal alchemy to transform the lead of your turbid ki into the gold of your luminous heavenly li. The question, of course, is how. What's the instruction manual for this daunting task? You have the diagnosis. Your innately perfect moral blueprint li is being obstructed by your murky, troublesome physical energy ki. Now you need the prescription. How exactly do you go about purifying this ki and allowing your true nature to shine through? Zhu Xi doesn't just leave you with the problem. He hands you a detailed step-by-step instruction manual for a lifetime of self-improvement. It's a demanding regimen, one that requires unwavering commitment and tireless effort. He calls it abiding in reverence and investigating principle to the utmost. The first half of that prescription is abiding in reverence Zhu Jing. This is your daily mental posture. Before you even begin your studies, you must cultivate a state of focused seriousness. You sit quietly for a moment, letting the distracting thoughts of the day settle. You compose your body and your mind. It's not about emptying your mind like the Buddhists. Zhu Xi is very clear on that. It's about focusing your mind, making it attentive and ready for the task at hand. It's the mental equivalent of tidying your desk before you start to work. Reverence is the baseline of your entire practice, a state of mindful alertness that you are supposed to maintain throughout the day, whether you are reading a classic, speaking with a friend, or drafting a memo. It's a way of treating every moment as an opportunity for moral cultivation. With your mind properly focused, you are ready for the main event, investigating things to attain knowledge. G. Wuxi Hi's Hi. This is the intellectual core of Zhu Xi's method, his inheritance from Qing Yi, now fully fleshed out. He tells you that the principle Li is present in every single thing and every single event. Therefore, the way to understand the universal principle is to study it in its countless particular manifestations. He points to the classics on your shelf. You must read, he says, but not just to memorize the words. You must read to find the principle within them. You are to take a single passage, even a single sentence from the Analects or the Menus, and study it intensely. You read it aloud. You ponder its meaning. You consult the commentaries of the sages, especially his own, of course. You ask yourself, what moral principle is being illustrated here? How does it apply to my own life? You do this day after day, passage after passage, building up your understanding piece by piece. It is slow, methodical, intellectual labor. But it doesn't stop with books. The principle is also in the world, he insists. You must study history. Why did this dynasty fall? Why did that minister succeed? By analyzing the past, you can discern the principles of good governance and moral causation. You must also observe the natural world. Why does a mountain stand firm? Why does water flow downwards? In these patterns, you can see the workings of the cosmic order. And most importantly, you must investigate your own life. When you handle a particular task at work or have a disagreement with your brother, you must later reflect on it. What was the principle at stake? Did I act in accordance with it? Where did my selfish desires key lead me astray? It's an exhaustive, all-encompassing program of inquiry. You are essentially turning your entire life into a research project. The goal is to accumulate enough of these individual insights, these little moments of seeing the principle, that one day you will experience a breakthrough. Jushi describes it as a moment of sudden and thorough awakening. After all the hard work, all the piecemeal investigation, everything will just click. You will suddenly see the single unitary principle that connects the passage you read yesterday, the historical event you studied last week, and the argument you had this morning. In that moment of enlightenment, you won't just know the principle, you will have a direct, unmediated experience of it. Your mind will become one with the mind of the universe. This combination of gradual, painstaking work leading to a sudden breakthrough is one of the hallmarks of his system. It cleverly bridges the gap between the two competing schools. It satisfies the rationalists with its emphasis on rigorous study, and it satisfies the intuitionists by holding out the promise of a final holistic experience. Of course, this leads to a rather peculiar side effect, a culture of extreme bookishness. For generations of scholars after Zhu, investigating things often gets reduced to investigating books. The civil service exams increasingly test candidates on their mastery of Zhu's commentaries on the classics. Your entire career can hinge on your ability to correctly interpret a single line according to its orthodox reading. This creates a system that is incredibly learned, but can also be rigid and disconnected from practical reality. The ongoing academic debate here is a big one. What did Jushi really mean by investigating things? Was he advocating for something like an early form of empirical science, a hands-on study of the natural world? Or was he primarily focused on textual and moral investigation? Most scholars agree it was a mix, but the emphasis, especially in the later tradition, fell heavily on the latter. From where you stand as a student eager to begin the path seems clear if daunting. You have your reading list. You have your method. You have a lifetime of work ahead of you. But before Zhu's system can become the unchallenged orthodoxy, it has to face one final public showdown with its old rival. Jushi's system is comprehensive, logical, and powerful, but it's not the only game in town. The other stream of Neo-Confucian thought, the more intuitive school of mind descended from Cheng Hao, is still very much alive. Its greatest champion during this time is a scholar named Lu Jie. On a man who is in many ways Zhu's perfect opposite. Where Zhu is a patient builder and synthesizer, Lu Jie on is a charismatic speaker and a philosophical purist. Where Zhu's path is gradual and painstaking, Lu's is direct and sudden. The tension between their two approaches had been building for years, debated in letters and through intermediaries. Finally, in the year 1175, it comes to a head. You receive an invitation to attend a scholarly gathering at the Goose Lake Monastery in Jiangxi. This isn't just any meeting. The host has specifically invited both Zhu and Lu Jie on, hoping they can find some common ground and resolve their differences. It's the philosophical equivalent of a heavyweight championship fight, and the entire intellectual world is buzzing with anticipation. You travel for days to get there, joining a stream of other scholars, all eager to witness this historic encounter. The monastery itself is a beautiful, secluded place nestled among hills and beside a tranquil lake. The atmosphere is supposed to be one of scholarly harmony, but you can feel the underlying tension. The two men finally meet. They are outwardly polite and respectful to one another, as befits learned gentlemen. But their philosophical differences are immediately apparent. The debate kicks off before they even get to the main hall. Zhu, ever the diligent scholar, wants to begin by discussing the definitions of key terms from the classics. He believes that true understanding can only be built upon a firm foundation of textual knowledge. He wants to argue about pedagogy, what to teach first, what books are most important, the proper method of study. He is focused on the how of learning. Lu Yuan finds this entire approach tedious and completely wrong-headed. He waves it all away. To him, poring over texts and commentaries is trivial work. He thinks Xu is getting lost in the weeds, mistaking the tools of learning for the goal itself. He wants to talk about the fundamental nature of the mind in the universe. He is focused on the what of learning, the core truth. The argument crystallizes around a single point, the source of knowledge. You are there in the hall as the debate unfolds. Zhu stands his ground, reiterating his core belief. Knowledge comes from the outside in. You must investigate things, study the external world, read the classics, and accumulate understanding piece by piece until you can grasp the universal principle. It's a process of addition, of building up knowledge from external sources. Then Lu Yuan delivers his powerful counterpunch. He stands and declares with ringing confidence, "The universe is my mind and my mind is the universe." It's a stunning, radical statement. He argues that the mind and the principle Li are not two separate things. They are one and the same. Your mind is the principle. Therefore, you don't need to look for it in external things, in books or bamboo stalks. The ultimate truth, the complete moral law of the universe, is already fully present within your own consciousness. To seek for it outside is, in his famous phrase, like adding a wart on top of a wart. He tells a story about his childhood. He was reading an ancient text that used the characters for universe usual. He asked his teacher what it meant, and the teacher explained the spatial and temporal dimensions. Lu Yuan suddenly had an insight. What is within the universe is my duty. What is my duty is what is within the universe. It was a moment of realizing the complete identity of his own moral compass with the structure of reality. He didn't need to read any more books to know this. He just knew it. You can almost feel the collective intake of breath in the room. This is the heart of the disagreement. Zhu's path is a dualistic one. There is the mind and there is the principle that the mind needs to apprehend. Lu Yuan's is monistic. The mind and principle are a single entity. For Zhu, the path to sagehood is long and arduous scholarship. For Lu Yuan, it is a sudden direct insight into the nature of your own mind. All you need to do is clear away the selfish desires that obscure this original mind, and your innate moral knowledge will shine forth. His method is about subtraction, not addition. The debate rages for days, but they are talking past each other. They are starting from such fundamentally different premises that no real synthesis is possible. Zhu sees Lu Yuan's approach as dangerously subjective and anti-intellectual, too similar to the empty meditation of Chan Zen Buddhism. He fears it will lead to arrogance and a disregard for the wisdom of the sages. Lu Yuan sees Zhu's method as overly scholastic, needlessly complex, and ultimately lacking in confidence in the innate goodness of the human mind. He thinks it buries people in books and prevents them from ever having a genuine personal moral breakthrough. In the end, nothing is resolved. The two men part ways, each more convinced of his own position than before. The Goose Lake Monastery debate becomes legendary not because it created unity, but because it so perfectly crystallized the great divide in Neo-Confucian thought. Historians still argue about the nuances of this debate. Was Lu Yuan truly a monist? Did Zhu's system have more room for the mind than Lu gave it credit for? The encounter is often romanticized as a clash of pure intellect versus pure intuition, but the reality was likely more subtle. What is clear is that the battle lines have been drawn more sharply than ever. Zhu's complex scholarly system has a powerful charismatic rival that offers a path that is simpler, more direct, and for many far more appealing. You walk away from Goose Lake Monastery with your head spinning. The sheer intellectual force of the two Menju, Xi and Lu Yuan, has left you feeling both energized and deeply conflicted. Zhu's system is a magnificent cathedral of thought, grand, orderly, and reassuringly solid. But Lu Yuan's counter-argument is like a flash of lightning, a sudden brilliant illumination that is both thrilling and a little terrifying. His philosophy, the school of mind, offers a rebellious and radically simplified path to sagehood. You decide to seek out one of Lu Yuan's disciples to understand his ideas more deeply away from the heat of the debate. You find a scholar sitting not in a stuffy library, but under a willow tree by a river. He doesn't immediately hand you a book. Instead, he asks you a simple question. If you strip away everything you've ever been taught, every word you've ever read, what is left? The question hangs in the air. You grope for an answer. Your name, your family, your memories. He smiles gently. Those are all things that have been added to you. I'm asking what was there to begin with. This, he explains, is the essence of Liu Yuan's teaching. The goal is to find your BNX in your original mind. This original mind is not an empty slate. It is a luminous, intelligent, and inherently moral consciousness that is identical with the principle Li of the entire universe. It's not just that your mind is principle within it. Your mind is principle. This is the core revolutionary claim that separates him from Zhu Shi. For Zhu Shi, Li is an objective pattern that your mind must work to comprehend. For Lu, Li is the very substance and function of your mind itself. The implications of this are enormous. If the ultimate truth is already within you, then the painstaking process of investigating things in the external world becomes redundant. Why spend years studying the principle of bamboo-ness in a bamboo stalk when the principle of all things is already shining in your own consciousness? Lu famously said, "The 6 classics are all footnotes to my mind." This sounds unbelievably arrogant, but his followers explain what he meant. The wisdom in the sacred text isn't valuable because it's in a book. It's valuable because it's a record of other sages who successfully uncovered their own original minds. The classics are just confirmation, not the source of the truth. So how do you find this original mind? The method is deceptively simple. Honor the moral nature and focus on self-establishment. You must have unwavering faith that this good mind exists within you. Then your main task is to distinguish between what is your original mind and what is the selfish desire that obscures it. When you feel a flash of compassion for a stranger, that's your original mind. When you feel a pang of jealousy towards a successful rival, that's selfish desire. The work is not about accumulating external knowledge, but about a constant moment-to-moment process of inner purification. You simply need to clear away the debris of selfishness, and the original mind will naturally manifest its own lightened intelligence. This path is incredibly appealing to a certain kind of person. It appeals to those who are impatient with dry scholasticist. It empowers the individual, telling them that they hold the key to their own enlightenment. No intermediary or library required. It's a philosophy of supreme self-confidence. However, as you talk more with the disciple, you begin to see the potential dangers that so worry Zhu Shi. What if you mistake a selfish desire for a manifestation of your original mind? If there's no external standard to check your insights against, no classic text, no historical precedent, what stops you from becoming a law unto yourself? Liu Yuan's answer is that the original mind is self-authenticating. Its moral guidance is as clear and undeniable as the sun in the sky. To doubt it is the first step toward obscuring it. This leads to a fascinating historical what if. What if Liu Yuan's philosophy and not Zhu Xis had become the state orthodoxy? The civil service exams would be completely different. Instead of writing essays on the classics, perhaps candidates would be judged on their moral character and the clarity of their intuitive responses to hypothetical situations. The entire scholarly culture would be less about book learning and more about introspection and charisma. It's a tantalizing alternate history. One of the lesser-known, more curious aspects of Liu's thought is his deep belief in his own insights being almost on par with the ancient sages. He once had a dream where he was invited to a feast with Fu Shi, the mythical sage emperor. This was just a dream to him. It was a validation that his understanding was directly connected to the very source of Chinese civilization. This kind of supreme self-assurance is a hallmark of his school of thought. But in the end, Liu Yuan's school remains the minority report. He is a brilliant and inspiring figure, but he doesn't have Zhu Shi's talent for system building and organization. He writes far less, and his teachings are transmitted more through personal charisma than through comprehensive texts. While he wins many devoted followers, he doesn't create a curriculum. He doesn't create an institution. And in the world of Confucianism, the person who writes the curriculum and controls the canon is the one who ultimately wins the long game. Zhu Shi, the patient architect, is about to make his checkmate move. The dust from the Goose Lake debate settles, and the two philosophical camps retreat to their corners, each convinced of its own righteousness. Liu Yuan continues to inspire with his charismatic teaching. But Zhu, she the master strategist, knows that winning hearts is not enough. To truly shape the future, you have to shape the education of the future. He embarks on his most audacious and enduringly influential project. He decides to create the definitive reading list for every aspiring scholar in the empire. For centuries, the Confucian canon had been centered on the 5 classics. These are ancient, venerable, and notoriously difficult texts. The Book of Odes, the Book of Documents, the Book of Rites, the Book of Rites, the Book of Changes, Yi Jing, and the Spring and Autumn Annals. To master them required a lifetime of dedicated study. They were the foundation of all learning. But Zhu, she felt they were not the best starting point for a student seeking moral transformation. They were too archaic to dense, and their core message was often buried under layers of history and ritual. Zhu, she decides to perform a radical act of cultural curation. He selects for shorter, more accessible texts and elevates them to a new supreme status. He calls them the Sishu, or the 4 books. This is his ultimate power move, a stroke of pedagogical genius that will change the face of East Asian education for the next 700 years. The first book he chooses is the Great Learning Daxo. This is actually just a short chapter from the ancient Book of Rites, but Zhu, she sees in it the perfect step-by-step program for his philosophy. You sit down to read his new edited version. He has rearranged the text to make its message crystal clear. It begins with the grand goal, manifesting luminous virtue, renovating the people, undressing in the highest good. Then it lays out the famous 8 steps. Investigate things. Extend knowledge. Make the will sincere. Rectify the mind. Cultivate the self. Regulate the family. Order the state. Bring peace to all under heaven. It's his entire philosophy in a nutshell. It creates a seamless link from the inner intellectual work of a scholar to the outer practical work of governing the empire. The second book is the Doctrine of the Mean Zong Yong, another chapter extracted from the Book of Rites. This text provides the metaphysical backbone. It talks about the state of equilibrium and harmony in the universal moral order. It speaks of sincerity as the way of heaven and the process of becoming sincere as the way of man. It provides the cosmic justification for the moral cultivation described in the Great Learning. The third book is the Analects of Confucius, Lu Nyu. This is an obvious choice. It's the most direct record of the master's own words and deeds. But by placing it third after his 2 chosen appetizer texts, Zhu shares that you will now read Confucius through the lens he has already provided. You will see Confucius not just as a wise teacher, but as the perfect embodiment of the principles laid out in the Great Learning and the Doctrine of the Mean. The final book is the Meneus Men Gzi. This is perhaps his most strategic choice. Meneus, Confucius's most famous disciple, is the one who most explicitly argued for the innate goodness of human nature. By elevating the Meneus Zhu, she is firmly grounding his entire system in the belief that everyone possesses the 4 sprouts of morality: benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom. Meneus provides the psychological foundation for the whole enterprise. Together, these 4 books form a perfect curriculum. The Great Learning gives you the method. The Doctrine of the Mean gives you the cosmology. The Analects gives you the perfect rule model. And the Meneus gives you the psychological basis. It's a complete package for moral self-transformation. And then Zhu does something even more important. He writes the instruction manual. He spends years composing the Sishu Zhanggu Jizhu, or collected commentaries on the 4 books. This isn't just a commentary. It's a definitive orthodox interpretation. He explains every line, defines every term, and resolves every ambiguity, all according to his own philosophical system. When you read the 4 books with his commentary, you are not just reading the ancient texts. You are being guided step by step into the cathedral of Zhu's thought. The impact of this cannot be overstated. After Zhu Xi's death, his initial political disgrace fades. His philosophy, with its clear structure and comprehensive nature, starts to look more and more attractive to the imperial court. In 1313, a little over a century after his death, the Yuan dynasty makes a momentous decision. Zhu's 4 books and his commentaries are declared the official basis for the civil service examinations. Suddenly, Zhu's reading list is no longer optional. It is the key to power, wealth, and social status. For the next 600 years, from the Yuan through the Ming and Qing dynasties, millions of young men across China, Korea, and Vietnam will spend their entire lives in these four texts and, more importantly, Zhu Xi's interpretation of them. The beef is over. Zhu Xi has won. His school is no longer a school. It is the orthodoxy. But this victory comes at a cost, creating a world where conformity is prized above all else, and the life of a scholar becomes a very predictable and very narrow path. The question that historians still debate is whether this act of canonization was the ultimate fulfillment of Confucianism or the beginning of its intellectual stagnation. The world has changed. Zhu Xi's victory is now complete and total. His 4 books are not just on the reading list, they are the reading list. You are no longer a wide-eyed student exploring the exciting new ideas of the Song dynasty. You are now an aspiring scholar, official in the Ming dynasty several centuries later. The philosophical arguments are over, the debates have cooled, and what's left is a rigid and yielding curriculum. Your life is governed by a singular all-consuming goal: to pass the imperial examinations. And to do that you must become a master of one man's mind, Zhu Xi's. Your day begins before sunrise. You wake in a small sparse room, the air cool and still. After a simple meal of kongmi, you unroll your scrolls. The texts are the 4 books, your constant companions. You know entire passages by heart. Your voice a low murmur as you recite them over and over until the words lose their meaning and become pure sound, pure rhythm. But memorization is only the first step. The real work is mastering the commentaries. You spend hours a day poring over Zhu Zhu, the dense notes crowding the margins of the original text. Your task is not to question or to innovate, but to understand, internalize, and reproduce his exact line of reasoning. When the great learning says investigate things, you know that the correct answer is not, as a modern might think, to conduct a scientific experiment. The correct answer, according to Zhu Is commentary, is to exhaustively study the principle Li in every matter, starting with the classics and extending to your own moral conduct. When the Analects mentions benevolence, you must be able to explain it using Zhu Xi's framework of Li and Qi, defining it as the character of the mind and the principle of love. Every concept has a precise, orthodox definition. Your personal interpretation is not only irrelevant, it is dangerous. To deviate from a commentary is to risk failing the exam. The centerpiece of your training is learning to write the 8-legged essay. This is a highly stylized, incredibly rigid form of prose required for the highest levels of the exams. It's called 8-legged because the main body of the essay must have 8 specific sections, each with a prescribed structure and purpose. You have to write in parallel couplets with sentences of perfectly balanced length and tone. It's less like writing and more like solving a complex literary crossword puzzle. The topic is always a short quotation from one of the 4 books. Your job is to expound upon that quotation, but only in a way that demonstrates your complete mastery of Zhu Xi's orthodox interpretation. You spend years practicing. You analyze successful essays from past exams. You learn the clever turns of phrase, the elegant transitions, the approved allusions. It is an education in conformity. It grinds away at your originality, replacing it with a polished, predictable, and impersonal style. The system rewards those who are meticulous, patient, and above all obedient. It weeds out the rebels, the innovators, and the freethinkers. You experience the crushing pressure of the exams themselves. You are locked in a tiny bare cell for 3 days and 2 nights with only a brush, ink, and a bucket. You sleep on a wooden plank. You write endless essays on an endless series of prompts. The physical and mental exhaustion is immense. The stakes are impossibly high. Success means a government post, honor for your family, and a life of relative comfort. Failure means returning home in shame to study for another 3 years, a drain on your family's resources, your future uncertain. This system has profound social and intellectual consequences. On the one hand, it creates a common cultural and ideological framework that helps to unify a vast and diverse empire. An official from the cold north and one from the tropical south can communicate using the same classical allusions, in the same moral framework, all derived from Zhu Xi. It provides a shared language of governance. On the other hand, it leads to a palpable sense of intellectual stagnation. The beefs of the Song dynasty were exciting because they were alive. Now philosophy is no longer a living inquiry. It is a subject to be mastered for an exam. Scholars spend their energy not on new ideas but on increasingly esoteric debates about the finer points of Zhu Xi's commentaries. A strange niche area of study arises called causing or evidential research, where scholars tired of abstract metaphysics turn their rigorous minds to things like textual criticism, phonology, and geography, safer subjects that won't get them in trouble. This is a fascinating intellectual development, but it's also a symptom of the main philosophical avenue being closed for traffic. Historians are still divided on the long-term effects of this system. Some argue it created a class of highly literate, disciplined, and morally grounded administrators who were, for the most part, effective. Others argue that it crippled China's intellectual vitality, prioritizing literary polish over practical problem-solving and making the bureaucracy resistant to change and innovation right at a time when the outside world was beginning to change dramatically. For you sitting in your small room, the debate is academic. The reality is the page in front of you. The characters blur. Your back aches. The pressure is immense. You are a cog in a vast efficient machine for producing Confucian gentlemen. The vibrant argumentative world of the song masters seems like a distant, almost mythical age. You can't help but wonder if this is what they intended. Is this what Zhu, she the tireless seeker of principle, really wanted? A world where his search had ended and all that was left was to recite the answers. The Ming Dynasty is at its height. The empire is stable, prosperous, and culturally confident. The examination system based on Zhuxis orthodoxy is running like a well-oiled machine, churning out generation after generation of scholar officials who all speak the same philosophical language. On the surface, everything is orderly, harmonious, and exactly as it should be. But if you listen closely in the quiet corners of academies and the hushed conversations in provincial tea-houses, you can begin to hear the first faint whispers of dissent. The first cracks are appearing in the great wall of orthodoxy. The problem is not that people think she is wrong. The problem for a growing number of thinkers is that he is boring. His philosophy has become a sterile academic subject. It's something you master for an exam, not something you live. The vital personal quest for sagehood that so animated the song masters has been replaced by a soulless slog of memorization and essay practice. You see it in your peers. They can quote the 4 books backwards and forwards. They can write a perfect 8-legged essay, but you sense a deep disconnect between the lofty moral principles they recite and the way they actually live their lives. The system is producing hypocrites, men who can talk beautifully about benevolence but are ruthless in their pursuit of official position. This feeling of spiritual emptiness creates an opening, and into that opening other ideas begin to seep back in. You notice a quiet resurgence of interest in Zen Buddhism among the literary class. After centuries of being intellectually subordinate to Neo-Confucianism, its teachings on direct experience and enlightenment start to feel fresh and appealing again. They offer a sense of personal liberation that the rigid state orthodoxy cannot. Attending a silent meditation retreat at a Buddhist monastery becomes a fashionable, slightly subversive activity for scholars weary of the official curriculum. Even within Confucianism itself, the old rival is stirring from its slumber. You start to see scholars secretly or not so secretly reading the works of Lu Yuan again. His message that the truth is within your own mind, that you don't need to be buried under a mountain of books, suddenly feels incredibly relevant. It's a direct antidote to the scholasticist of the day. His words are a breath of fresh air in a stuffy, overcrowded library. One of the first major figures to publicly challenge the status quo is a scholar named Chen Xiangzheng. He is a fascinating character. He studies for the exams like everyone else, but he finds the process deeply unsatisfying. He feels that the endless focus on textual analysis is leading him further away from the truth, not closer to it. After failing the metropolitan exams several times, he has a crisis of faith in the system. He abandons the standard curriculum and goes home. There he develops his own unique method of self-cultivation. He doesn't read. He doesn't write. He just sits. For years he practices a form of quiet sitting very similar to Chan Buddhist meditation. He is not trying to analyze principle. He is trying to directly experience the substance of his own nature, which he identifies with the natural cosmic flow. He describes the goal as realizing the mystery of yin and yang's ceaseless procreation. His students said that when he finally achieved his enlightenment, his face glowed and he looked like a god in a temple. His teachings are radical. He openly criticizes the bookishness of the Jushi school. He famously says, "The scholars of today take the dregs of others and make them their own business." He argues that true learning comes from Zeit or self-realization, a direct intuitive grasp of the truth that is independent of texts. This is heresy to the Orthodox school, but it resonates with many who are tired of the dregs. Chen Xianjiang becomes a provincial celebrity, attracting a large following of students who are drawn to his emphasis on personal experience over scholastic achievement. Another crack appears in the person of Wu Yubi, a scholar who takes the idea of living the philosophy to an extreme. He becomes disillusioned with the scholarly life and decides to become a farmer. He believes that true understanding can only be found through hard physical labor and direct engagement with the world. He makes his students work in the fields alongside him, arguing that carrying manure is just as important a part of self-cultivation as reading the classics. This is a direct practical critique of a system that often produced scholars with soft hands and a deep disdain for manual work. These figures, Chen Xianjiang, the quiet sitter, Wu Yubi, the farmer scholar, are not trying to overthrow the whole system. They are trying to reform it from within to bring back the element of personal experience that they feel has been lost. They are reintroducing the body, intuition, and lived reality into a philosophy that had become dangerously abstract and cerebral. Historians often debate the extent of this intellectual ferment. Was it a widespread rebellion or just the grumbling of a few marginal figures? The official system was certainly powerful enough to ignore them for a while, but they are creating a new intellectual climate. They are asking dangerous questions. What if Shu Xis method isn't the only way? What if the path to sagehood is simpler, more direct, and more personal? They are tilling the soil, preparing the ground for a true philosophical revolutionary. The old beef, the epic clash between the school of principle and the school of mind, which had seemed settled for centuries, is about to be reignited, and the man who will light the match is about to have a very frustrating encounter with a bamboo stalk. The cracks in the wall of orthodoxy are spreading, but the world outside that wall is changing even faster. You find yourself in the middle of the Ming Dynasty, a period of dramatic economic and social transformation. The quiet agrarian world that the songmasters knew is giving way to something new, something more chaotic, vibrant, and commercial. This new atmosphere will provide the perfect cultural backdrop for a new philosophical rebellion. You walk through the streets of a city like Suzhou or Yangzhou and the energy is palpable. This is no longer just a world of scholars and peasants. A new class is on the rise, the merchants. Thanks to a boom in internal trade, vast fortunes are being made in silk, cotton, salt, and ceramics. Wealthy merchant families build lavish gardens, collect rare art, and patronize upper troops. Their sons may still study for the exams, but their values are subtly different. They are more pragmatic, more individualistic, and perhaps a little more hedonistic. The old Confucian hierarchy, with scholars at the top and merchants near the bottom, is being turned on its head by the sheer power of money. This new commercial energy fuels a cultural explosion. It's an age of great vernacular novels like Journey to the Western Water, margin stories full of adventure, rebellion, and individualism that are a world away from the staid moralism of the classics. The printing industry is booming, making not just the classics, but all kinds of books more widely available. The arts are flourishing, with painters like Shen Chu and Wen Zhengming creating works that are more personal and expressive. There's a new emphasis on feeling emotion and the unique quirks of the individual. All of this creates a deep cultural tension. The official ideology, Xuxi's Neo-Confucianism, preaches stability, order, self-restraint, and adherence to a strict social hierarchy. But the reality of daily life for many people is one of flux, ambition, and the pursuit of personal desire. The philosophy feels increasingly out of sync with the times. It's like trying to navigate a bustling, unpredictable modern city with a 1,000-year-old map. This disconnect is felt most keenly by the scholars themselves. You see friends who pass the exams and get a government post only to find themselves disillusioned by the corruption and bureaucratic inertia. You see others who fail the exams and instead of studying for a retry decide to become painters, poets, or even businessmen, finding more freedom and self-expression in these pursuits. There's a growing sense that the official path to success and self-fulfillment is not the only one, and maybe not even the best one. This new climate gives rise to a wave of individualism. Thinkers start to question the old collectivist values. They begin to celebrate the authentic self, even if that self is flawed and full of desires. A cult of king, deep feeling, passion, sentiment emerges in literature and art. Love stories that defy social conventions become immensely popular. This is a direct challenge to the Neo-Confucian emphasis on suppressing personal feelings See your selfish desires in favor of universal principle Tianli or heavenly principle. People are starting to wonder, what if my desires aren't just an obstruction to be cleared away? What if they are an essential part of who I am? One of the most eccentric and telling figures of this trend is the scholar Li Shi. He is a full-blown iconoclast. After a moderately successful official career, he shaves his head like a Buddhist monk, but refuses to join an order and becomes a wandering intellectual bomb thrower. He fiercely attacks the hypocrisy of the scholar official class, calling them phony Confucianists. He champions what he calls the childlike mind and heart, the NGX, in the pure, spontaneous, and authentic self that exists before it gets corrupted by the dregs of book learning and social conventions. He argues that the greatest works of literature are those that spring from this authentic desire-filled mind, not from moralistic principles. His ideas are shocking, dangerous, and incredibly popular, especially with the youth. He is eventually arrested and takes his own life in prison, becoming a martyr for the cause of individualism. This social and cultural ferment is crucial. It creates an audience that is ready for a new philosophy, one that can speak to their experience of a more complex, dynamic, and individualistic world. They are tired of a system that tells them to be sages but treats them like parrots. They are looking for a philosophy that is more personal, more direct, and more affirming of their inner life. The stage is perfectly set. The official orthodoxy feels stale and disconnected from reality. The quiet rebels like Chen Jianzhang have reopened the path of intuitive personal experience. The wider culture is buzzing with new ideas about individualism and authenticity. All that's needed is a figure of immense genius, courage, and charisma to step into this environment and pull all these threads together into a powerful, revolutionary new synthesis. He needs to be a man who has mastered the old system, seen its flaws from the inside, and has the intellectual firepower to build something new. And his name is Wang Yangming. Before the great revolutionary arrives to set the world on fire, the quiet rebellion continues to simmer. The discontent with the hyper-scholastic book-obsessed orthodoxy of Zhu, she is growing, and this pushes thinkers to explore alternative paths to wisdom. One of the most significant of these paths leads away from the library and into the quiet stillness of one's own mind. You encounter one of the main figures of this movement, a scholar named Zhan Ruo Shui, a contemporary and friend of the man, who will soon overshadow everyone, Wang Yangming. Zhan Ruo Shui isn't a firebrand rebel. He's a respected scholar and official, but he has a deep-seated belief that the mainstream practice of Neo-Confucianism has lost its way. He sees his colleagues chasing after official titles, endlessly debating obscure points in the commentaries, and losing sight of the ultimate goal, becoming a sage. He argues that the problem lies in the very method they are all so diligently practicing. He believes the followers of Zhu Shi have made a critical error. They have taken the phrase "investigate things" and applied it almost exclusively to external things, books, historical events, natural phenomena. In doing so, they have created a damaging split between the self and the world, between the mind and principle. They are always looking out there for the truth, when all along the truth is right where they are. Zhan Ruo Shui's solution is a simple, elegant pivot. He says the place to find heavenly principle Tianli is not in a book or in a bamboo stalk, but everywhere, and most importantly within your own experience. His most famous teaching is encapsulated in a simple phrase: everywhere and everything is the manifestation of heavenly principle. You don't need to go searching for it. You just need to recognize it where you already are. How do you do this? His primary method is like Chen Jianzhang before him, a form of quiet sitting. But he gives it a specifically Confucian framing. You sit in a state of calm and composure, not to empty the mind like a Buddhist, but to allow the mind to settle and return to its original clear state. In this state of clarity, you can directly experience the heavenly principle that is the very substance of your mind and the universe. It's a process of letting the mud settle so the clear water can be seen. This practice is designed as a direct corrective to the busy, anxious, and outward-looking mentality of the typical exam candidate. Instead of filling your head with more and more information, you are encouraged to periodically empty it of clutter. It's a way of re-centering yourself, of touching base with the fundamental reality that the books are only pointing towards. This might sound a lot like the school of mind of Lu Jie, and it is. Zhan Ruo Shui is consciously reviving that tradition, but he is less confrontational than Lu. He tries to frame his ideas in a way that can coexist with the mainstream. He doesn't say burn the books. He says, recognize the principle everywhere, then go back and read the books and you will see that they confirm what you have already experienced. His teachings become incredibly popular, especially in the south of China. He attracts thousands of followers and establishes numerous academies. He creates a genuine movement that runs parallel to the state orthodoxy. This creates a fascinating dynamic. A young scholar might spend his mornings practicing the eight-legged essay to please the examiners, but spend his afternoons in one of Zon's academies, practicing quiet sitting to actually try and become a better person. One of the more peculiar debates that arises from this is the unceasing procreation Shengshang Biyushi controversy. Zon and his followers use this classic Taoist-inflected phrase from the Book of Changes to describe the dynamic life-giving nature of the universe and the principle within the mind. To them it captured the vital flowing quality of reality, but to the strict followers of Zhu, this sounded dangerously naturalistic and Taoist. They preferred the more static and purely moral terminology of Zhuxi. It was a battle of metaphors. Is the ultimate reality a perfect, unchanging moral blueprint, or is it a dynamic, creative, life-giving flow? The rise of thinkers like Chen Jianzhang and Zon Ruo Shui is a crucial stepping stone. They are the John the Baptists of this new philosophical era. They legitimize introspection, personal experience, and meditative practices within the Confucian tradition. They create a space for a philosophy that is less about what you know and more about who you are. They soften up the intellectual ground, making it receptive to an even more radical and powerful message. They demonstrate that there is a deep hunger for a more personal and spiritually fulfilling form of Confucianism. They prove that you can challenge the Zhuxi orthodoxy and not just survive but thrive. The quiet scholar sitting alone in his room is becoming a figure of immense power once again. He is preparing the world for the arrival of a man who will not just sit but act. Into this world of simmering discontent and quiet rebellion, a man of staggering genius and boundless energy arrives. His name is Wang Yangming. He is not just a scholar, he is a poet, a calligrapher, a military strategist, and a statesman. He seems to excel at everything he does. He is the walking, breathing embodiment of the Confucian ideal of the scholar official who is also a man of action. He is destined to become the most important and influential thinker since Zhuxi, the man who will take the smoldering embers of the school of mind and ignite them into a philosophical bonfire. You first encounter Wang Yangming as a young man, and he is nothing short of audacious. He is born into a high-ranking official family and receives the best education imaginable. From an early age, it's clear he is different. At his wedding, he famously wanders off and is found the next day at a Taoist temple deep in conversation with a priest about the arts of nourishing life. He is insatiably curious not just about the Confucian classics, but about military strategy, Taoist longevity, techniques, and Buddhist meditation. His early life is defined by a passionate, almost desperate search for the right way. He is a product of the very system he will later critique. He sincerely believes in the teachings of Zhu. Xian takes the call to investigate things with the utmost seriousness. He is convinced that if he just tries hard enough, if he follows the instructions perfectly, he will become a sage. This leads him to one of the most famous and formative episodes of his life. It's a story he tells later, a perfect illustration of the earnest, slightly obsessive young man he was. He is in his late teens talking with a friend about Zhu's instruction that one must investigate the principle in all things. They decide to put it to the ultimate test. They will investigate the principle of a bamboo stalk. You can picture the scene. Two intense young men sitting in a garden staring at a clump of bamboo. They are not admiring its beauty. They are trying to intellectually penetrate its very essence, to grasp the lee of bamboo-ness with the full force of their minds. They stare and stare and stare. They go through all the received wisdom. The bamboo is upright, a symbol of the gentleman. It is hollow, a symbol of humility. But this isn't enough. They want to experience the principle directly, to have that flash of insight she promised. His friend gives up after 3 days, exhausted. But Wang Yangming presses on, determined to succeed where his friend failed. He stares for 7 days and 7 nights, his mind growing more and more frantic. At the end of the 7th day, he doesn't achieve enlightenment. He just gets sick from sheer mental and physical exhaustion. This moment is a profound turning point. It is his first great crisis of faith. He had followed the prescribed method of the great master Shu, she with more diligence and intensity than anyone could ask for. And it had failed. It had not led to sagehood, it had led to sickness. He begins to harbor a deep and personal doubt about the orthodox path. If the number one sage since Confucius couldn't be found at the bottom of a bamboo stalk, maybe he was looking in the wrong place entirely. His life then takes a dramatic turn. He passes the exams and embarks on an official career, but his innate sense of justice quickly gets him into trouble. He writes a memorial to the emperor defending a group of censors who had been imprisoned by a powerful and corrupt eunuch named Liu Jin. Liu Jin, who holds the real power at court, is enraged. Wang Yangming is arrested, publicly flogged in front of the palace gates, a humiliating and often fatal punishment, and then exiled to the remote malaria-infested frontier of Guishu. This should be the end of his career, if not his life. He is stripped of his rank, disgraced, and sent to a place considered to be barely civilized. He is forced to live among non-Han Aboriginal peoples in a place with no books, no scholars to talk to, and constant physical hardship. For any other Confucian scholar, this would be a living hell, a complete failure. But for Wang Yangming, this brutal exile becomes the crucible in which his new philosophy will be forged. He is stripped of all the external trappings of the scholarly life. There are no libraries to consult, no commentaries to memorize, no eight-legged essays to practice. All he has is his own mind and the raw, challenging reality of his daily existence. He has to build his own shelter, learn the local dialect, communicate, and find a way to maintain his spirit in the face of despair and disease. This experience solidifies a question that had been haunting him since his stare down with the bamboo. What does one do to become a sage when there are no things to investigate? When all the external supports of the Shi method are removed, what is left? It's the same question the quiet sitters were asking, but now it's being posed with life-to-death urgency. The answer will not come to him in a quiet moment of garden meditation. It will come in the middle of a desperate night in a stone coffin he built for himself when he is convinced he is about to die. The bamboo stare down is the story everyone knows, the one that perfectly captures the earnest absurdity of a young man taking a philosophical instruction way too literally. You can almost feel the headache, the eye strain, the growing sense of panic as the days tick by and the bamboo remains stubbornly unrevealing lie itself. This isn't just a funny anecdote. It's the symbolic failure of an entire philosophical system at a personal level. Wang Yangming threw himself head first into X's method, and all he got was exhaustion. The system promised that diligent external investigation would lead to enlightenment, but for him it led to a dead end. This experience plants a seed of doubt that will flower in the harsh soil of his exile. But before he gets to his great epiphany, his journey to Guishu is an adventure in itself, full of peril that tests him in ways scholarship never could. After being flogged and sentenced to exile, he knows that the powerful eunuch Liu Jin is not done with him. An attempted assassination is a very real possibility. So in a move straight out of one of the popular adventure novels of his time, he fakes his own death. On his way south, he throws his clothes onto the bank of the Qian River, leaving a poem to suggest he has drowned himself in despair. He then flees, traveling incognito. It's a wildly unscholar-like thing to do, a pragmatic act of survival that shows his nimble, unconventional mind. He hides out in a Taoist monastery for a time, then secretly sails to Fujian. The story gets even more bizarre. According to some accounts, he has a prophetic dream that tells him not to stay, and he leaves just before Liu Jin's agents arrive to arrest him. This is one of those historical details that blurs the line between biography and hagiography. Did it really happen? Or is it a story told later to burnish the legend of a man who seemed to be guided by a higher power? Either way, it adds to his mystique. He eventually stops running and accepts his fate, making the long, arduous trek to the remote outpost of Longcheng in Guishu province. The name Longcheng literally means dragon field, but it is anything but glorious. It's a primitive, unhealthy environment. The locals speak a different dialect and live in what to a sophisticated official from the capital must have seemed like a state of barbarism. There is no proper housing. There are no books. There is no one to talk to about philosophy. It is a total intellectual and cultural wasteland. You have to imagine the psychological shock. He has gone from the pinnacle of Chinese society to its absolute fringes. His entire identity as a scholar, an official, and a learned gentleman is rendered meaningless here. His knowledge of the classics is useless when he needs to figure out how to build a shelter or avoid contracting malaria. He and his 2 servants who followed him into exile fall ill. Their living conditions are abysmal. This is where his youthful interest in Taoist nourishing life techniques might have actually come in handy. He has to focus on the basics of survival. He teaches his servants to sing songs to keep their spirits up. He gives lectures to the local people on basic Confucian values, adapting the lofty principles to their simple daily lives. He is forced to be a philosopher in the most practical sense imaginable. He is no longer investigating things, he is living them. The most powerful symbol of his despair and ultimate breakthrough is the stone coffin. Convinced that he is surrounded by hostile forces, both human and natural, and that he might die at any moment, he has a stone sarcophagus carved for himself. He spends his nights sleeping in it, meditating on the meaning of life and death. This is an act of supreme psychological intensity. He is literally rehearsing his own death, confronting the ultimate reality of his own preeminence. This is the absolute antithesis of the Jushi method. Jushi's path is one of order, control, and gradual accumulation of knowledge in a safe, scholarly environment. Wang Yangming's path is one of chaos, crisis, and the stripping away of all certainties. He is pushed to the very edge of human experience. He can no longer rely on external authorities. The voice of the master Jushi offers no comfort or guidance here. The classics on his shelf are 1,000 miles away. All he has is his own consciousness, his own xin or mind-heart. He is locked in an existential struggle. He asks himself the ultimate question, the one he had been circling ever since the bamboo incident. The sages could surely deal with this situation. What would a sage do? A sage's mind would be calm and principled even here. But hell, since there are no external things here to investigate in the orthodox, since the source of the sage's strength must be internal, it cannot be anywhere else. The logic is inescapable, forced upon him by the brutal reality of his circumstances. The answer has to be inside him. The stage is set for the epiphany that will change the course of Chinese philosophy. The year is 1508. The place is a damp, primitive cave near Longcheng-Guishu. You are with Wang Yangming, who lies in his stone coffin, a man at the absolute nadir of his existence. He is physically ill, professionally disgraced, and spiritually adrift. The world he knew has been stripped away, leaving him in a state of profound existential crisis. He has tried everything. He followed Jushi's method and found only exhaustion. He has faced death and political persecution. He has been pushed to the very limit of his being. There is no way left to look for answers. No books, no teachers, no external world to investigate. There is only the darkness of the cave and the frantic workings of his own mind. One night in the deadening silence, something shifts. He describes it later as a moment of sudden, overwhelming realization. It's not a logical conclusion he reaches after careful deduction. It's a flash of insight, a complete reorientation of his entire being. He sits bolt upright in his stone coffin, the words tumbling out of him as if from another source. He suddenly understands. I now see that my own nature is of course sufficient. I was wrong to look for the principal Li in things and affairs. It's a simple statement, but it contains a philosophical revolution. In that single moment, the central pillar of Zhuxis orthodoxy, the entire program of investigating things in the external world collapses for him. The great truth he had been seeking in bamboo's talks, in ancient texts, and in the careers of long-dead sages was not out there at all. It had been inside him the entire time. This is the great epiphany of Longcheng. He realizes that his mind xin is not a vessel that needs to be filled with principle from the outside. His mind is the principle. The structure of his own consciousness is identical to the moral structure of the universe. Xinji mind is the principle. This is the foundational axiom of his entire philosophy, the point from which everything else will flow. It's the ultimate revival and radicalization of the ideas of Lu Jie Yu Yuan, but born not of scholarly debate, but of intense personal suffering and breakthrough. The feeling that accompanies this insight is one of profound liberation. You can imagine the immense weight lifting from his shoulders. The desperate, anxious striving to become a sage by accumulating external knowledge is over. The goal is not to acquire sagehood, but to uncover it. It's already there. All the years of intellectual labor of trying to grasp the Li of this and the Li of that were misguided. It was like a man with a priceless jewel in his own pocket searching for treasure all over the world. He immediately starts to see the world in a new light. The next day, he tests his newfound insight. He takes the classic examples that had always been used to illustrate the relationship between mind and principle. For instance, the principle of filial piety. Zhu Xi would say that the li of filial piety is an eternal objective principle which you then apply in your relationship with your father. Wang Yangming now sees it differently. He argues that the principle of filial piety does not exist in a vacuum. It only comes into existence in the act of loving and respecting your father. There is no principle of the flower separate from the flower itself. The principle is in the seeing of the flower, the experiencing of it. Mind and object, principle and phenomenon are inextricably linked. This insight gives him an incredible sense of peace and self-sufficiency. He is no longer at the mercy of his environment. His moral compass is not dependent on having a library or a quiet study. He can be a sage right here in this miserable cave in Guishu because the source of sagehood is within him. It's an unconquerable inner fortress. This moment is one of the most famous epiphanies in the history of philosophy, ranking up there with Descartes. I think, therefore, I am or Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, and like those other stories, it is surrounded by a certain amount of legend. Is the story of the stone coffin literally true? Or is it a dramatic metaphor for a period of intense psychological struggle? Historians debate the details, but the core of the story is undeniable. At some point during his exile in the depths of his despair, Wang Yangming had a transformative intellectual and spiritual breakthrough that refounded his entire worldview on the absolute primacy of the mind. He emerges from his exile a changed man. Soon after his epiphany, the political winds and the capital shift. The corrupt eunuch Liu Jin falls from power and is executed. Wang Yangming is pardoned and his official career is restored. But he is no longer just another ambitious official. He is a man with a mission. He has discovered what he believes to be the true teaching of the sages, a teaching that had been obscured for centuries. He now has to share it with the world. He has his central truth. Now he has to unpack its radical implications for how one should live, act, and know. Wang Yangming returns from the wilderness of Guishu not as a broken man, but as an enlightened master. He carries with him a single powerful truth forged in the crucible of his suffering. Xing Li, the mind, is principle. Now he must explain this radical idea to a world steeped in the orthodoxy of Zhu Xi. You become one of his new students, drawn in by the buzz surrounding this charismatic official, who seems to have discovered a simpler, more direct path to sagehood. The first lesson he teaches you shatters the foundation of everything you've learned. He gathers you in a garden. He doesn't point to a bamboo stalk. He points to a flowering tree. You see this flower, he says. Zhu Xi would tell you that the principle of this flower is an objective reality independent of your mind. He would say that the flower's color and fragrance are out there and your mind goes out to perceive them. This is the standard common sense view. But I say, he continues, his voice calm but firm, when you do not look at this flower and your mind are both in a state of silent potential. When you look at it, its colors and forms become clear all at once. From this you know that this flower is not external to your mind. This is a stunning, almost bizarre statement. Is he saying the flower doesn't exist when you're not looking at it? It sounds like a form of pure idealism, a philosophical rabbit hole. His critics immediately jump on this, accusing him of falling into the Buddhist trap of seeing the world as a mere illusion projected by the mind. But Wang is more subtle than that. He is not saying the physical key of the flower isn't there. He is making a radical claim about the nature of Li, or principle. The principle of the flower, its meaning, its reality, as a coherent, knowable thing, is inseparable from the consciousness that perceives it. The universe as a world of meaning and principle is co-created by your mind. Without a mind to perceive it, the cosmos is just a silent and differentiated sea of ki. It is consciousness that brings the principle to life. He gives you another famous example. Imagine you are on a boat looking at the shore. The mountains, trees, and buildings are all there, but they only become a landscape, a meaningful whole, when they enter your field of awareness. The principle of landscape is actualized by the act of seeing. This core idea that your mind is the universe in a microcosm is incredibly empowering. It means you don't have to go searching for truth in the external world. You are already a walking, talking embodiment of cosmic principle. The universe is not a foreign country you have to explore with a map written by Zhu Xi. It's your own home. Your mind isn't just a mirror reflecting an external reality, it's a lamp that illuminates it. This leads to a complete reevaluation of human nature. For Zhu Shi, your nature li was obstructed by your physical endowment qi. The goal was to purify the qi to get to the li. Wang Yangming simplifies this dramatically. He says your mind xin in its original state is heavenly principle. There is no separation. The mind is not a battleground between a good principle and a bad physical force. The mind in its essence is pure goodness. So where does evil come from? If the mind is perfectly good, why do people do bad things? Wang's answer is simple and direct. Evil arises when the mind is stirred by selfish desires. See you. It's not that there is some inherently evil substance within you. It's just that the original clear state of the mind gets clouded. He uses the analogy of a clear spring. The spring water itself is perfectly pure. But when mud and sand gets stirred up from the bottom, the water becomes cloudy. The problem isn't the water, it's the sediment. Similarly, the problem isn't your mind. It's the selfish thoughts that you allow to attach to it. The task of self-cultivation, therefore, is not the laborious lifelong project of purifying qi. It is the moment-to-moment practice of preventing your selfish thoughts from obscuring the original luminous state of your mind. It's a work of preservation, not of transformation. You are simply trying to maintain the factory settings, not install new software. This idea is met with both wild enthusiasm and fierce resistance. His followers feel a sense of incredible liberation. They are freed from the crushing burden of scholasticism and the anxiety of their turbid qi. They are told they are already endowed with everything they need to be a sage. His critics, however, are horrified. They see this as a recipe for anarchy. If everyone just follows their own mind, believing it to be the ultimate principle, what happens to objective standards of right and wrong? What stops someone from claiming their selfish desire is actually the voice of heavenly principle? It's the same critique that was leveled against Lu Jiu Yuan, but now it's even more potent because Wang Yangming is a far more influential and powerful figure. The philosophical beef is back on, and it's hotter than ever. You've grasped the foundational principle. Your mind is the universe. It's a liberating, powerful idea, but it also feels a bit abstract. How does this profound truth translate into your actual day-to-day life? Are you just supposed to sit around feeling one with the cosmos? Wang Yangming's next major teaching provides the answer, and it's a concept that is both incredibly dynamic and notoriously difficult to translate. Chi Xing He are the unity of knowledge and action. You come to him with a common problem. Master, you say, I know that I should be filial to my parents. I understand the principle completely, but sometimes in the moment I get annoyed or impatient. My knowledge and my actions are separate. This is a classic human dilemma, one that the Zhu Shi school explained with the Li and Qi framework. Your perfect knowledge Li is being obstructed by your unruly emotions Qi. Wang Yangming looks at you and says your entire premise is wrong. That which you call knowing and that which you call acting are in fact two words for the same single effort, he explains. If you truly knew filial piety, you would already be acting filial lie. The fact that you don't act filial lie proves that you don't truly know it. You just have a vague intellectual idea of it. This is a radical redefinition of knowledge. For the entire tradition before him, knowledge was something you acquired first and then with effort you applied it. It was a two-step process. Know then do. Wang collapses the distinction. For him, true genuine knowledge is the action. They are not two different things. They are two aspects of a single unified process. He gives you a series of simple, powerful analogies. Take knowing pain, he says. You can't say you know what pain is until you have actually felt it. The feeling of it is the knowledge of it. Or consider knowing how to see. You can't separate knowing how to see a color from the actual act of seeing it. The seeing is the knowing. It's the same with morality. It is like knowing what a bad smell is. As soon as you smell it, you already dislike it. The smelling and the disliking are a single event. No one smells a bad odor and then decides later, now I will dislike it. So when you say you know you should be filial but fail to act on it, what you really have is just empty second-hand information. You've read about filial piety in a book. You can define the term, but it hasn't become part of your being. True knowledge of filial piety is the spontaneous, effortless, and sincere act of being a good son or daughter. The moment you are acting with true filial piety, that is the moment you truly know it. This has profound implications for self-cultivation. It makes the whole process intensely practical and immediate. The goal is no longer to sit in a study, accumulate a vast storehouse of intellectual knowledge, and then hope to apply it later. That's a recipe for the hypocrisy. He saw all around him scholars who could write beautiful essays on benevolence but work rule to their servants. Instead, the world itself, your daily life, becomes the primary arena for learning. Your cultivation happens in the act. You don't learn to be a good official by reading manuals on governance. You learn it in the messy, complicated business of actually governing, of settling a land dispute, of organizing famine relief, of dealing with a difficult subordinate. Each action, each decision is an opportunity to both exercise and deepen your knowledge. This is why Wang Yangming himself was so effective as a military commander despite having no formal training. When he was tasked with putting down rebellions, he didn't retreat to his tent to read Sun Tzu's Art of War. He immersed himself in the situation, and his knowledge of how to win was forged in the real-time process of fighting the war. His strategies were often unconventional and brilliant because they were a direct, spontaneous response to the reality on the ground, guided by his clear, unobstructed mind. Of course, this idea is also widely misunderstood. His critics erection his knowledge and think he is promoting a kind of thoughtless, blind activism. They accuse him of denigrating book learning on study, but Wang is quick to correct them. He's not saying you shouldn't study. He argues that study, when done properly, is itself a form of action. When you are diligently pondering a passage from the classics, you are engaged in the act of knowing. But the ultimate test is always whether that act of knowing translates into your conduct in the world. If your study doesn't make you a better person, you're not really studying. You're just playing with words. The debate over the precise meaning of ZH, Hai Xing Hei, I will rage for centuries. Is it that knowledge is action, or that knowledge necessarily leads to action? The phrasing is ambiguous, but the core message is clear. Wang Yangming is trying to heal the split between the inner life and the outer world, between theory and practice, that he believed had crippled Confucianism. He is telling you to stop waiting until you are a perfect sage to start acting like one. The path to sagehood is the acting itself. You have the grand metaphysical claim. Your mind is the universe. And you have the practical method, the unity of knowledge and action. But a crucial question remains. If you're supposed to act spontaneously from your mind's true nature, how do you know in the heat of the moment that you're acting from your true good mind and not from a selfish impulse? You need a guide, an internal compass. Wang Yangming provides one. He gives it a name that will become the most famous and central term in his entire philosophy, Liang-Ghi. Innate knowledge. You're in a discussion with him, and you bring up the classic moral dilemma from Menaeus. Anyone, upon seeing a child about to fall into a well, will have an immediate and thinking feeling of alarm and compassion. Zhu Shi would explain this as your perfectly spontaneously manifesting itself. Wang Yangming agrees with the example but gives it a different name and a deeper significance. That immediate gut-level feeling of this is rightened. That is wrong, that he says is Liang-Ghi. He explains that Liang-Ghi is the original substance of your mind. It's an innate, infallible moral sense that you are born with. It's not something you learn from books or from society. It's pre-installed. It's the faculty that allows you to distinguish between right and wrong, good and evil, just as your eyes allow you to distinguish between black and white. It is innate because it's part of your nature, and it is knowledge because it provides clear, direct guidance. This is a revolutionary concept because of the absolute authority he gives it. For Wang Yang-Ghi is never wrong. It is a direct connection to heavenly principle. It is in his words self-intelligent and self-aware. It doesn't need to reason or deliberate. He just knows. When you are about to say something unkind, there's a little internal check, a feeling of don't do that. That's your Liang-Ghi. When you share your food with someone who is hungry, the warm feeling of rightness you experience is the approval of your Yang-Ghi. So if everyone has this perfect, infallible moral compass, why is the world full of bad behavior? Wang's answer is consistent with his earlier ideas. The problem is not with the compass. The compass is always pointing true north. The problem is that we ignore it. We allow our selfish desires, see you, to obscure it. He uses a powerful metaphor. Your Yang-Ghi is like the sun, and your selfish desires are like floating clouds. The sun is always shining, but on a cloudy day you can't see its light. The goal of self-cultivation is not to create the sun, it's to disperse the clouds. This leads to his final most refined program for self-cultivation, which he calls Zhi Yang Zhi, or the extension of innate knowledge. This becomes the central practice for his followers. It's a simple, direct, and continuous effort. In every thought, word, and deed, your job is to consult your innate knowledge and act in accordance with it. It works like this. A thought arises in your mind. For example, the thought to gossip about a rival. You immediately hold it up to the light of your lens eye. Your innate knowledge will instantly tell you, this is wrong. This stems from jealousy or selfish desire. Having recognized it as wrong, you must then rectify it. You must actively cast the thought aside. Conversely, a thought to help a struggling colleague arises. Your Yang Zhi Chai instantly affirms it. This is right. This stems from benevolence. Your job is then to act on it without hesitation, to extend that good thought into a good deed. This is a constant moment-to-moment inner discipline. It's not about achieving some far-off state of sagehood in the future. It's about being a sage right now in this very thought. Every time you follow your Liang Zhi Chai, you are a sage. Every time you ignore it in favor of a selfish desire, you are an ordinary person. The difference is not in your fundamental nature, but in your moment-to-moment choices. One of the more interesting and subtle aspects of this doctrine is that Liang Zhi Chai doesn't just tell you what's right or wrong, it supposedly knows everything. Wang Yangming believed that this innate knowledge was a kind of universal intelligence. There's a famous, slightly weird story where a student asks him if his Liang Zhi Chai knows how many petals are on a flower, or the name of a specific herb. Wang's answer is that in its original unobstructed state, the mind's innate knowledge is all-pervading and has the potential to know all things. This mystical, almost paranormal quality of Yang Zhi Chai is something his later followers will seize upon and take in even more radical directions. The doctrine of Liang Zhi Chai is the capstone of Wang Yangming's philosophy. It provides the ultimate unshakable foundation for his system. It is personal, it is practical, and it is profoundly empowering. It tells you that you don't need an external authority, not a book, not a teacher, not even Zhu Shi himself to tell you how to live. You already have a perfect divine guide within you. All you have to do is learn to listen to its voice and have the courage to follow where it leads. So here we are at the culmination of this centuries-long philosophical beef. The two heavyweight champions are in their corners, representing two fundamentally different visions of the universe and the human place within it. On one side, you have Zhu Shi, the great synthesizer, the master architect of the school of principle. On the other, you have Wang Yangming, the man of action, the revolutionary champion of the school of mind. Let's step back for a moment and put their ideas side by side to see the great debate laid bare. At the very heart of their disagreement is the relationship between your mind X, IN, and the principle of the universe, Li. For Zhu Shi, they are two distinct things. Li is the objective, eternal, and perfect blueprint of reality. Your mind is the tool that you use to apprehend that blueprint. The mind looks outward to understand the principle. The fundamental structure is dualistic, mind-principle. The great challenge of life is to bridge the gap between them. For Wang Yangming, this is the core. He smashes the dualism to pieces. For him, mind and principle are one and the same thing. Shengshi Li. Your mind in its original state is the principle. You don't look outward for the blueprint. You look inward and discover that you are the blueprint. The fundamental structure is monistic, mind-principle. The great challenge of life is to remove the selfish desires that prevent you from realizing this inherent unity. This core difference leads to completely opposite paths of self-cultivation. Zhu Xi's path is the investigation of things Ji Wu. It's a path of addition. You must study, read, analyze, and accumulate knowledge from the outside world. You learn about principle by studying its myriad manifestations in classics, history, and nature. It's a long, gradual, and scholarly process. You are building yourself up piece by piece, hoping for an eventual breakthrough. It's an intellectual journey. Wang Yangming's path is the extension of innate knowledge, Zhi Yang Zhi. It's a path of subtraction. You don't need to add anything to your mind. You need to remove the clutter. You turn your attention inward, focusing on the immediate intuitive guidance of your innate moral sense. The work is not about accumulating knowledge, but about purifying your intentions moment by moment. It's a direct, spontaneous, and intensely personal process. It's a spiritual practice. Their views on human nature also diverge. Both agree that human nature is originally good. But for Zhu, see that goodness Li is always fighting against the drag of your physical endowment key. Your body, your emotions, your desires, these are all part of your murky key and are potential obstacles to be overcome in discipline. There's an inherent tension between the moral and the physical. Wang Yang Ming sees no such tension. The mind Xin, which encompasses both feeling and thought, is fundamentally good. Desires themselves are not the problem. The desire to eat when hungry or to sleep when tired is perfectly natural. The problem is only the selfish desire, the attachment that clouds the mind's original state. His view is more holistic, integrating the physical and the emotional into a unified and fundamentally good self. Even their ultimate goals, while both called sage, should feel different. The Zhuxi sage is a master scholar, a man of immense learning and profound understanding of the cosmic order. You picture him in his library surrounded by books, his mind a perfect mirror, reflecting the principle of the universe. The Wang Yang Ming sage is a man of decisive action and profound self-awareness. You picture him on a battlefield or in a magistrate's court, making difficult decisions with calm, intuitive clarity, his mind a luminous lamp that shines on the world. One of the interesting academic debates that still simmers is whether their two philosophies are truly irreconcilable, or if they are just two different ways of describing the same ultimate reality. Some scholars argue that they represent two distinct personality types. The rational, systematic, intellectual Zhu, she versus the intuitive, charismatic, activist Wang Yang Ming. Others suggest they are offering different skillful means to reach the same goal, like two different paths up the same mountain. Zhu Xi's path is safer, more methodical, and better for the average person. Wang Yang Ming's path is faster and more direct, but also more dangerous, easily leading to arrogance and self-deception if you're not a person of his caliber. From your vantage point as a student trying to make sense of it all, the difference feels very real. It's a choice between two worlds. Do you trust the accumulated wisdom of the tradition codified in the classics and explained by the great master Zhuxi? Or do you trust the immediate, undeniable voice of your own conscience, your own Yang Zhi as championed by Wang Yang Ming? Do you find truth by looking at the world or by looking in the mirror? This is the ultimate question that the great philosophical beef of the Song and Ming dynasties leaves you with. There is no final referee to declare a winner. There is only the choice you must make for yourself. Wang Yang Ming dies in 1529 on his way home from a successful military campaign. His last words when his attendant asks for his final testament are famously serene. This mind is luminous and clear. What more is there to say? He leaves behind him a philosophical legacy that is as powerful as it is open to interpretation. And just like with any great charismatic teacher, the moment he is gone, his followers take his ideas and run with them in all sorts of wild, radical, and sometimes bizarre directions. The final phase of this philosophical beef isn't between two great masters, but between the various factions of Wang's own school, each claiming to be his true heir. You find yourself in the midst of this Tzu school phenomenon, named after the hometown of one of Wang's most radical disciples, Wang Zhen. This is the left wing of the Yang Ming school, and they take his teachings on the absolute authority of the mind and Liang Zi, each eye to their logical and sometimes extreme conclusions. If the mind is principle and innate knowledge, is the ultimate guide, then the old structures, the classics, the rituals, even the social hierarchy start to look less and less important. You meet Wang Zhen, the leader of this new movement. He is not your typical scholar. He comes from a humble background as a salt merchant. He is theatrical, charismatic, and speaks in a simple, direct language that appeals to the common person. He walks around dressed in the strange, archaic robes of an ancient sage with the ceremonial tablets tucked in his belt, announcing his intention to remake the world. He is a philosophical showman. He takes Wang Yang Ming's idea that the streets are full of sages and makes it his central message. He teaches that every single person, no matter how humble, be they a woodcutter, a farmer, or a merchant, is a sage in potential. You don't need years of education to realize it. You just need to trust your own mind. This is an incredibly democratic and appealing message, and he gathers a huge following from all walks of life, something the more elite schools of Confucianism had never managed to do. But as the Tzu school evolves under its later leaders, the ideas get even more radical. You encounter the teachings of Yan Zhen, who argues that if the innate knowledge is the ultimate reality, then even the basest human desires and emotions are part of its natural functioning. This leads to a kind of moral naturalism, a celebration of the authentic emotional self that verges on hedonism. The old Neo-Confucian discipline of preserving heavenly principle and extinguishing human desire is turned on its head. Now it's more like heavenly principle is found within human desire. This leads to some truly wild behavior. You hear of Tzu school adherents who flout all social conventions. They drink wine, sing songs, and consort with courtesans, all under the guise of following their innate knowledge. They see traditional rituals and social etiquette as a form of hypocrisy, a cage for the free spirit. Their goal is Kwang, a kind of mad chance and Buddhist style. Authenticity is spontaneous freedom from all external rules. The most notorious and tragic figure of this radical wing is Yen. He is a brilliant and fearless social critic. He takes the idea of the unified cosmic body and turns it into a call for a kind of communalism, questioning the private ownership of property. He is a fierce critic of the patriarchal family system, arguing for more egalitarian relationships. He is in essence a political radical who uses the language of the school of mind to justify his revolutionary social vision. His ideas are so dangerous to the state that he is eventually arrested and dies under mysterious circumstances in prison, becoming another martyr for the cause. Of course, the more conservative right wing of the Yang Ming school is horrified by all of this. They try to rein things in to argue that Wang Yangming never intended for his ideas to be used to justify such licenses and social anarchy. They insist on the importance of moral effort, discipline, and the guidance of the classics. They try to reconcile Wang Yangming's teachings with a more sober and stable system of Jushi. This period, the late Ming dynasty, is one of incredible intellectual ferment and chaos. The philosophical landscape is a kaleidoscope of competing ideas. You have the rigid state orthodoxy of Zhu. She's still chugging along in the examination halls. You have the sober, moderate followers of Wang Yangming trying to create a respectable alternative. And you have the wildcat Shan of the Tzu school who seem determined to tear the whole system down. Historians look back at this period with a mix of fascination and alarm. Was the Tzu school the ultimate liberating fulfillment of Wang Yangming's philosophy, a true people's Confucianism? Or was it a tragic distortion, a cautionary tale of what happens when the idea of inner authority isn't tethered from discipline and social responsibility? There is no easy answer. It shows the inherent instability and power of the school of mind. In the hands of a disciplined genius like Wang Yangming, it's a tool for immense good. In the hands of others, it can become an excuse for self-indulgence and social rebellion. The great beef has splintered into a dozen smaller, even messier arguments, and the intellectual confidence of the Ming dynasty begins to crumble, just as the dynasty itself is heading towards its own catastrophic collapse. The sun is setting on the Ming dynasty. The air is filled with a sense of unease and impending doom. The intellectual chaos of the late Ming, with the wild excesses of the Tzu school and the rigid dogmatism of the official curriculum, seems to mirror the political decay of the empire. Factionalism paralyzes the court, corruption is rampant to the north, a new powerful threat is gathering force, the Manchus. In 1640, for the unthinkable happens. Manchu armies sweep down from the north, breach the Great Wall, and capture Beijing. The Ming dynasty, after nearly 3 centuries of rule, collapses. This is a moment of profound soul-crushing trauma for the Chinese intellectual world. It's not just a change of dynasty, it's a conquest by a people they consider to be barbarians. The entire scholar official class is plunged into a crisis of confidence. How could this have happened? Their sophisticated philosophy, their moral cultivation, their entire worldview had failed to save the empire. A painful period of soul-searching begins. As you navigate this new uncertain world under the early Qing dynasty, you can feel a powerful intellectual backlash taking shape. The blame for the fall of the Ming is laid squarely at the feet of the philosophy that had dominated its final century, the school of mind of Wang Yangming. His teachings, which once seemed so liberating and empowering, are now seen as the source of the problem. Thinkers of this new era, like the formidable Gu Yan, will look back at the late Ming and see a generation of scholars who were lost in abstract, empty talk. They were obsessed with introspective debates about the mind, nature, and enlightenment while the country crumbled around them. The mad Chan antics of the Tzu school, their disregard for social norms and practical learning, are held up as Exhibit A. Wang Yangming's philosophy, they argue, with its emphasis on subjective intuition and its downplaying of book learning, had led to a fatal disconnect from reality. It produced scholars who were arrogant, self-indulgent, and utterly unprepared to deal with the practical challenges of statecraft and defense. In its place, a new intellectual movement arises, one that is sober, pragmatic, and almost allergic to metaphysics. It's a powerful swing of the pendulum back in the other direction. This movement is often called evidential research, causing a trend that had already begun in the Ming but now becomes the dominant mode of intellectual life. The new motto is "Seek truth from facts." Scholars turn away from grand philosophical systems and focus on concrete, verifiable knowledge. You see this new spirit everywhere. Scholars devote their lives to incredibly detailed empirical projects. They work on historical geography, trying to accurately map the locations mentioned in ancient texts. They study phonology, attempting to reconstruct the ancient pronunciations of Chinese characters. They become masters of textual criticism, meticulously comparing different editions of the classics to root out errors and forgeries that had accumulated over the centuries. This is a kind of intellectual housecleaning on a massive scale. In a way, this is a return to a different aspect of Zhu Xi's legacy, not his grand metaphysics of Li and Qi, but his demand for rigorous evidence-based scholarship. However, these king scholars are even more skeptical than Zhu Xi. They question everything, including parts of Zhu Xi's own commentaries. Their approach is more scientific in a modern sense, focused on tangible proof and philological precision. The great philosophical beef that animated the Song and Ming dynasties is for all intents and purposes over. Neither side has won. Both have been discredited in the harsh light of dynastic collapse. The grand synthesis of Zhu Xi is seen as too rigid and dogmatic. The radical inwardness of Wang Yang is seen as too subjective and impractical. What's left is a deep suspicion of all-encompassing philosophical systems. The search for a single, universal way is abandoned in favor of a more modest, piecemeal pursuit of factual knowledge. And so you reflect on the long, strange journey of this debate. It began in the Song dynasty with a group of brilliant thinkers trying to build a new spiritual and intellectual home for Confucianism, one that could compete with the cosmic visions of Buddhism and Daoism. This effort produced the great synthesis of Zhu Xi, a magnificent philosophical cathedral that became the basis of state orthodoxy for centuries. But its very success led to rigidity and stagnation, prompting the great rebellion of Wang Yang, who sought to tear down the cathedral and relocate the sacred back into the heart of the individual. His revolution in turn spiraled into what many saw as chaos and self-indulgence, contributing to a climate of intellectual weakness that failed to prevent a national catastrophe. There is no neat conclusion, no single winner. The legacy of this epic argument is not a final answer, but a series of enduring questions that will continue to haunt Chinese thought for centuries to come. Is truth found in the objective world or in the subjective mind? Does sagehood come from patient study or sudden insight? What is the proper balance between moral discipline and authentic self-expression? The beef never truly ended. It just went dormant, leaving behind a rich, complex, and deeply human story of brilliant minds wrestling with the biggest questions of all, a legacy of arguments waiting to be reignited by future generations.